we have a problem because again, it's many people with your name. So it could be very good if we can rename those people now. I sent a message to Mauricio, but yeah. I did it with Elisa, but I don't know because there are people, they don't have a photo, so I don't really know who they are.
I am here.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, Elisa. How are you doing? Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
We are starting soon, so.
Oscar, necesitamos que las personas nos hablen para poder saber su nombre, porque así a simple vista no podemos saber su nombre y no podemos renombrarlas. Entonces, en el momento en el que ellas nos hablen, pues seguramente lo sabremos.
Empiezo yo, soy Elisa.
Eres Elisa. Mauricio, pero si nosotros le decimos que ellos mismos se cambien el nombre, ¿se puede hacer?
Sí, ellos mismos se pueden cambiar el nombre. Sí.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So thank you very much for being here. We are so far like 32 participants, so we are going to wait around 2 minutes more to start. But before of that, we want to do, to resolve some technicalities. So we have like some people with the name that is Gabriel Vélez Cuartas, because you are using the same link. So if you can rename yourself and use your real name just to know who you are. I have like 3 or 4 Gabriel Vélez here, so.
I count 2 of me.
Yeah.
But
in quantum theory, you can, Gabriel.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Please,
yes, sure, Elisa.
Yes.
Am I the only English speaker?
No.
No, the whole workshop is in English and most of the participants, they speak English. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's just that we are organizing the workshop with Universidad de Antioquia. So the people who is helping us, they speak Spanish. Some of them speak English, so we prefer just to speak Spanish to resolve these technicalities. But all the workshop is going to be in English. So
yeah, no, I was just going to say that I know because I speak Spanish.
Oh.
Speaking is a big word, but I definitely understand Spanish, so I can understand everything that's going on, which is why I was asking, like, I wouldn't be able to present in Spanish, but for questions and answers, if people prefer to swap to Spanish.
Okay. That's very good to know, because we have many events that we need people who speak Spanish. I mean, who can understand Spanish. So that's good to know.
7 months in Argentina, exactly for this reason. So when I get invited to these things, I can do them in Spanish.
Good to know. Can we start, Gabriel, please?
Yes, but one of me is telling me that how can we change our name? I think that
you go where is your name and you click and you go where it say plus or more, and then you can use rename and then you can change your name. But if you know who are you? So if I know your name, I can change your name. Okay, good. So let me do it. One cannot do that with the person. Oh, because this is the real Gabriel. Okay. That is this one. Okay. Diego.
Ah, Diego. He's Diego Chavarro. Diego, it's me.
Okay, Diego. Good. So now we can start, Gabriel.
Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. You are welcome again to this Transformative Metrics workshop. Thank you very much to being here one day again. For today, this presentation, it's going to be short because we have a lot of things to do. I think that, well, first I want to thank you on behalf of our Vice Chancellor of Research at the University of Antioquia and our Dean, John Mario Muñoz, the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the university. I am Gabriel Vélez. I am the Research Director of Social Science and humanities at the university. And I'm here with Oscar Romero. Oscar Romero, he is a PhD candidate at the Utrecht University. We have, of course, we have a team that it's organizing this event. Eliana Martinez, who is consultant at the Vice Chancellor Office. We have here Mauricio Dominguez, who is helping us with the moderation of all our sessions, and Marta Liliana Ruiz, he's working with us too, helping us with this task. Well, Oscar is going to present you more or less the dynamic. There is something important. We are going to explain you what we are meaning by an agenda, a route map that we are working on after this workshop. And Oscar is going to explain you how can we work together building this agenda, I think. Oscar, please.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. So I think that I have like a couple of proposals for today. So the first one is just in terms of the organization. So as we did yesterday, we had first kind of interview or a conversation. Today we have Elisa Velotti, Gaston, and Diego Chavarro. Sorry for not pronouncing your second name, Gaston, but it's very difficult for me. And then we present the tables, like the ranking sections. And then we have a coffee break, and then we have like the presentations in every one of these breaking sections. But my question here is we can have like 15 minutes more. So if we can have like 15 minutes more for having more discussion, because yesterday it was a problem to really discuss indeed all of the issues that you wanted to do in every one of the tables. And then finally, we have a plenary, and we have like Pablo Patiño, who was part of the Misión de Sabios, that it was one of the reasons because we are here. We can explain that later. And then we have again like some discussion. So if you are agree or you are not agree, please just let us know if you think that is a good idea to have like these 15 minutes more for the discussion in every ranking section. The second thing, just write a message or just raise your hand and we can know. Okay, Vipashi. Gabriel, I think that is a problem with your presentation. So we have like many black boxes and people are getting distracted. So just don't use the presentation.
Yes. Okay, okay.
That's easier. Yeah, that's easier. Okay, so yesterday when we finished the workshop, it was like many questions around like, what is next after this workshop? So what we thought before is try to write a policy brief or try to write an agenda or try just to write memories of the workshop. But I think that we have like today a more concrete proposal if you think that it is a good idea. So what we try to do before is to organize all of the contributions around certain topics. So what we think is that we can work all together. So we have like if we have the help of the commentators, we can make like chapters. And every one of the chapter is around of the conversation that you have in the breaking sections. I know that some breaking sections are clear, the topic is just one, and another breaking sections is many topics there. But what I found yesterday from the comments is that it's really a way like to have a concrete narrative around like the topic that we were discussing. So we can work together, and that we can do with Gabriel is like try more to organize and try like to write maybe an introduction based on the interviews that we did yesterday to Matías Ramirez, Johannes Hott, and Ismael Rafols, and today with Gaston, Elisa, and Diego. And then we can build all together like a common document. So we need to see what is next and the possible follow-ups. So the other follow-ups is, as Gabriel explained yesterday, is the Latin American Metrics Congress. As well, we have in TIPSI next year the international conference in sustainability transitions. So I think there is many opportunities to present like that book agenda or whatever that it is. And yeah, like kind of like the idea is to try to work all together and try like to push out for agenda in transformative metrics. So I don't know if you have any question like that we can do is during the workshop, you can write comments or you can send an email or we can figure out how to discuss about it, or maybe in the end, it's up to you. I don't know if you have something else to say, Gabriel.
Yes, surely we are going to email you and ask you for some help to try to build this agenda. I think that is very important because we don't have, we are seeing that we don't have any horizon here or landscape, a great landscape about the play of the measurements and metrics in this important transformation that we need worldwide. No, I think that we can, if anyone, please, we want to know about your different questions, about your comments about this workshop. It's very important for us because this is a way to try to communicate with you. And please, at the chat, we are going to record all your comments. And this is very important to try to make another kind of spaces or open a new scenarios, etc. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And I think that it's time to begin our agenda, Oscar, please.
Yes, Vipachi is asking for the agenda. So we don't really have like to get a slide with the different points. So it's what I try to do before is to explain. So first we have this interview. Then we have like the explanation of the 4 tables when you can see specifically every table where is the topic.
Oscar, I will try to present the agenda one more time.
Okay,
maybe...
yeah, I think that is important for people to know what is the steps. Thank you.
Okay. This is the conversation that we are going to have with Oscar, Elisa Velotti, Diego Chavarro, and Gaston Hemerichs, the next presentation. Then we are going to have 4 different panels. I'm going to present them after this interview. And then we'll have a coffee break, and the sessions will begin after the coffee break. Then we will have a plenary after the sessions that we have. Those sessions will last almost 1 hour and 15 minutes. This is our proposal. We propose you at the program that only will last 1 hour, but yesterday we saw that it's important a little more time for discussion. And then we will have comments from Pablo Patiño. He's an important researcher here in Colombia, and here going to present a final reflection about the issues that we worked at this workshop. Well, this is a general vision of our program, and I think that it's important to begin with the next session. Oscar.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have like some slides to my questions. So just give me a second. Yes. Sorry about this. I always have problem with this. It's like, I don't know, 10 times that I'm presenting. Okay, here we are. Okay, so first, let me say thank you to Elisa Velotti, Gaston Hemerichs, and Diego Chavarro for being here, for accepting this invitation to speak about metrics in the context of sustainability transitions. I know that all of you come from different backgrounds in social science, Gaston from natural science, and then for science, technology, and innovation studies. Diego from literature to work as well in science, technology, and innovation. So it's partly this transdisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity that you have in yourself. That is the reason because I wanted to chat with you. Elisa is at the Department of Sociology at Manchester University. and is at the Mitchell Center for Social Network Analysis. I really recommend one of her books that is Qualitative Networks, and a person as well who tried to work in networks. So it was very inspiring for me, and I think that it could be great to learn from her about mixed methods and how to implement in our case in sustainability transitions. Then we have Augustin Hendricks. He is my PhD supervisor, one of my PhD supervisors, so thank you for being here. He is at the Department of Innovation at Copernicus Institute, and as well in the afternoons, he's in the Center for Science and Technology Studies at Leiden University. And finally, we have, but not lastly, we have Diego Chavarro. I want to underline his work in the Green Book. That was one of the first books to think from the science, technology, and innovation, the SDGs and the sustainability transitions. He gave for me the first step to map knowledge related to the SDGs. So it's very nice to have you here. He did his PhD as Peru, and now he's working as a consultant in Colombia. So thank you very much, all of you. So I want to propose today like a different dynamic that we had yesterday. So I want first like to underline some points, like to give like some background information and kind of the landscape to discuss. And then I want to invite you to have like around 10 minutes. If you spend less time, that's all right, to make your points around like this background that I'm bringing to you. And then I really want to have like sometimes for discussion and to have like some questions from the participants. So if it's fine for you, I'm just going to start with the background. So, well, it is the first, I don't know how many times I have made this presentation, and I always have problems to really make like things go step by step. So just to make it easy. So right now we are working in a project that is called Proportions with Climate Kick. And we have been thinking about like different metrics to measure sustainability transition. So first here is kind of the background of the different rationalities, frameworks around science, technology, and innovation. So I want to start with the R&D and regulation model, that is a linear model, when most of the metrics are related to inputs, outputs, and then diffusion of innovations and knowledge. And mainly all of the metrics are around the attributes or properties of individuals. So if it is men, female, developed, underdeveloped, developing, and these kind of categories to try to understand the process of knowledge production and as well the technologies production. Then, like more from the 18th and 19th, we have the national systems of innovation, when kind of, not really in depth, let me say, like system thinking became like quite dominant. And we were looking at actors and agents, specifically about composition, structure, function. And we, for instance, try to understand what is the relationship between firms, states, universities, and how they can enable new innovations and new knowledge. So here basically is that the interaction across actors, if you see the network map, they can, when they come from different like pathways, they can produce like new knowledge and therefore like new innovations. But now that is the discussion that we are having here is like an emerging frame that is the transformative innovation, or that is very connected to the sustainability transitions field. So we have what we call a quasi-evolutionary model. It's like a kind of, I see it like a new structuralism, like when the actors and the structures are important and how transformation as a process happen. So what we want to know here is like the processes, the mechanisms, and then try to learn from that understanding. In sustainability transitions, more of the methods are related to qualitative approaches and participatory methods. But now they are asking for try to integrate more quantitative research. So what I saw yesterday in the presentation is that we have in the one side like qualitative methods and the other side like the quantitative methods, but we are not really integrating them. It's very few research, at least in this workshop, and I think that is something that happens. It's a lot of quantitative and qualitative, but the way to integrate them and the possible epistemological and ontological considerations to integrate like these two different bodies or these two different approaches like to see the work is not that easy. So I just want to acknowledge here like the thinking around this, that is Johan, Christoph, Caetano, as well Gaston. Let me say many conversations with him about like around like these ideas. So here is like the points that I want to reflect about this. Like the first question is, we can say, okay, the methods in frame 1 and frame 2 are completely useless. Or we can think in what ways we can introduce them in the frame 3. So it is more like in the pragmatic point of view, you know what I mean? Like to try to think about the question and which methods we need and how we can integrate, for instance, social network analysis. For instance, we have here some multivariable analysis like principal component analysis. We had a presentation yesterday about that. But then what is like the possible methodological assumptions that are necessary to be considered? What is like the kind of ideas that we need to think around that? So how to do it basically. And then more specifically, I want like to think about the mixed method. So as I was saying before, how to integrate like these two different point of view worldviews of transformations, and what is again like the kind of considerations that we should have around that. I know that all of three of you work in networks, and we have like many contributions here. I count like more than 6 and 7 that they are like proposing social network analysis as a way to understand transition. So I know that you, for instance, Diego is now working in map of imaginary, so maybe you can bring like some insight for that work to try to think in mixing methods, to try to think how they can contribute to frame 3. Elisa has a huge experience working in networks and in qualitative networks as well. And I'm sure that you can as well like help us to discuss how we can integrate in sustainability transitions. And Gaston, who has been working as well in the regional level, in the national level of system and innovation, and now is as well like going in the direction to try to think about transformations. So this is my point. I don't know if someone else from the audience want to underline something else, or if we can go directly to Elisa, Gaston, and Diego. My proposal is to start with Elisa, if it is fine, but you can let me know how you prefer to do it. If you want to start, Elisa. Now I'm having...
I'm happy to start.
Okay.
Right, so thanks for, I mean, I do have some slides that might guide a little bit of my discussion. I mean, as you said, because you asked us not to prepare for it, then I haven't prepared a proper presentation, but I think there were a few points that you asked me to address, which might be good. So I'm just gonna share my screen with you. So thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be invited, especially I love these opportunities for to go into a different field, a different substantive field that I haven't got much experience with, because I always end up learning much more than what I talk about. So my expertise, as Oscar said, is in mixed method in social network analysis. I participated and led many research projects that apply this specific methodology in many substantive fields. So a little bit about myself, that's a young me. When I was a PhD student, I trained in Milan. I've been in Manchester since 2008. And in Manchester, we set up the Mitchell Center for Social Network Analysis, which is intentionally an interdisciplinary and mixed method research center. So we don't specialize in only quantitative analysis or qualitative analysis. And we have a bunch of researchers that include mathematicians, sociologists, statisticians, economists, and recently criminologists. So as I said, my area of expertise is how you mix methods. So there's the book that I wrote about mixed method in sociological research. And I have investigated many different areas of social sciences as gender, science, criminal networks, and recently health networks, which is probably where I'm going to end up talking about a little bit. So Oscar asked me about introducing a little bit what is social network analysis. And so what I normally like to say is that social network analysis is not really a quantitative method per se. So it's a general perspective that wants to reproduce the structure, or the social structure in mathematical terms, but is because of this is neither qualitative nor quantitative, but it's structural. So it doesn't represent quantities as you would do in classic quantitative methods, but patterns that emerge from the interweaving of ties between actors and agents. And one common aspect that it has with your, I think the second framework that you presented, is that these emerging patterns are systemic. So you cannot just observe a portion of the network and infer the structure of the rest. You need to observe the whole network structure to understand what these patterns consist of. But also they are highly contextual. So we normally say that each network is unique, that you can't really find exactly the same network in different contexts, because they are embedded in the social reality. So you can have mechanisms that are generalizable, like homophily, transitivity, and so on and so forth. But you cannot really generalize from one structure, from that one network to the other. So these two aspects already tells you that network analysis really lies in between methods. It's not quantitative and it's not qualitative, but it can be very easily mixed with both of these, with both methods. So it is a relational approach. So what you're interested in are relations between agents, rather, and the dependency that these relations imply. And therefore, it's completely different from the qualitative and quantitative classic methods. But you can use quantitative methods to describe and model the networks, and you can use qualitative methods to describe and contextualize the network. So both of them, in my experience, are extremely important when you conduct any network study. So going back to the idea of the structure and agency that I think it was in your third framework, networks are not structures that determine the agency, but they are social structure because they inform individual agency. So agents are creative and intentional within their networks, and therefore they constitute the web of relationship and the structure of the networks. But then those networks that they create in turn shape their opportunities for action. And this dynamic of the structure and agency within networks are embedded in the cultural context in which these relationships and interactions take place, which again is why it's important to have a qualitative grasp of the networks that you study. They are also temporally organized, so networks can be less and more formalized. So you can have an informal group of friends, for example, building a network, but you can also have very much structured organization like universities, fraternities, and they can be short-lived or durable. So the ontological nature of social network lies in the consistency of these fabrics of interactions that can be more or less durable and more or less formalized. So when you think about the ontological nature of networks, they are not just social constructions, but they are not even something that exists out there independently from agents. They are always embedded within the everyday life of the agents that create them. And therefore, when we look at social networks, we cannot just simply aggregate the individuals together as you would do, for example, with survey data, but you need to observe the pattern structure that such individuals have within when they interact with each other. And the issue that we have in social network analysis, which is exactly the same issue that any social researcher have, but not even any researcher in science have, is how do you transform the messy and complex batch of raw data that you might collect into formal units of measurements. And these can be themes in narratives, values in variables, numbers in networks. So for me, I can't really see the difference between methods, but I can only see different complexities in transforming what I see in everyday life into something that can be measured somehow, even if it's just a qualitative interview. So one thing that I think it's used, network analysis, it's useful in the context of science and transformation. How do you call it? STI, science, technology, and innovation. Is that obviously network analysis can be very useful in understanding how innovation take place. So from my, I mean, I don't really know much about how innovation in itself, but the classic model of innovation is the bell curve of how many people adopt an innovation. So these classic diffusion models that you can see where you have innovators, early adopters, and early majority and late majority. But obviously this model doesn't take into account that the way in which innovation spread around is by people passing them on with each other. So, you know, the more you are connected to an innovator, the more chances you have to be an early adopter, for example. So we can use these network models to plan interventions and accelerate behavioral changes and distribution of innovation. So I think, you know, like that much work has been done in social network analysis from the very early days in trying to understand how do we identify people who can really trigger innovation and can be positioned, better positioned to diffuse an innovation within their networks. And the Tom Valente has worked extensively on network intervention to increase the efficiency of especially health intervention. So the idea is really how do you identify people in networks that can be useful for whatever outcomes that you need. So you might have opinion leaders, in other cases you might be more interested in brokers. So each of the conceptual ideas that you have in your mind will have some form of metrics that you can apply to identify positions in networks that might facilitate or hamper the diffusion of an innovation. So one type of intervention, for example, that you might have, it's based on segmentation, where you look at the network and you look if there are different groups within a network. So the idea is that if you have different groups and if they might not have the same opinion about things, then you want to identify this group first to understand how would they adopt or not an innovation. So there's a lot of literature now in social network analysis that really suggests how would you tailor an intervention. So if you want to diffuse something, being like a preventive measure for a disease or a new type of technology, for example, or even a new idea, what type of intervention, how do you use your network? So for example, suggestions are that if the innovation is very complex and technical, then you should really base your diffusion on the advice network, because people would ask for advice when they don't understand things. While when you find that there are some barriers of adoption that are cultural, then discussions network are probably more useful for understanding why certain things don't circulate. And you guys are on my
sorry to interrupt you, but we are running out of time, so you can try to go a little bit faster.
Okay, and so you have different type of so the literature now suggests you quite in detail what you would do in one case or the other. So, and for example, an example that has been run is the diffusion of multivitamins and chlorine to purify water, where what came out was that in one case, multivitamins is very easily accepted because you just need to give pills to people, while purified water requires changing behaviors. So the different complexities in these two very simple innovations that they were trying to diffuse in Honduras meant that they needed to use different methods, and they found different barriers. So qualitative methods really are essential when you're trying to do this kind of studies, because if you don't understand the context in which a network is embedded, then you can't really understand what type of metrics would be useful or not, and what kind of strategy would be more successful or not. I'm going to stop here. I've got examples, but I think I'm going to leave the discussion to my colleagues now. I hope that was something that was useful.
Thank you very much, Elisa. That's very nice. I don't know, Gaston or Diego, maybe Diego? Are you there, Diego?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Diego, for accepting the invitation. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for this invitation, and also to Elisa for this fantastic presentation. I have learned a lot from what you have presented, and I think, you know, especially your last point about intervention on networks with different strategies is very important for this group, who actually is trying to motivate transformative changes. So it's very, very useful also for reflection on, you know, these interventions when they are aimed at people and groups of people, they also have ethical implications. So really a good subject for debate in this group about metrics. Well, my points basically have to do with the idea of transformation. So if we think about transformation, we can see transformation as basically a radical change in socio-technical systems in one particular direction, which is sustainability. So if we understand transformation in that way, my points have to do with the different elements of this definition. So first, I would like to talk about the idea of radical change, then about the idea of the social. What do we mean by the social? And third, I would like to talk about the sustainability part of the equation. In terms of radical change, I would say that most of the metrics that we have at the moment are metrics based on a snapshot of how the picture looks like. So if we got snapshot of how things are happening, we don't have enough information to understand change. So one basic thing that we need to understand change, and especially if we want to understand radical change, is to incorporate the time dimension to our analysis. I would say that in order to, you know, to understand whether transformation is happening, the most basic stuff is to understand whether there is a change in time. But this also brings about many, many challenges, which I know are being addressed also by papers in this discussion. For instance, there is an interesting paper that got my attention because it's called Tipping Points in Transitions of Socioeconomic Systems, which is being presented in one of the sessions or has been presented already. But they show, you know, the challenges in measuring transformation. For instance, do we know that we are now at this moment in a transition towards something? And if we know that we are in transition, do we really know where are we going? The conclusion for now, I think, is we don't know. We know previous transitions, but we cannot really predict future transitions. So that's a real challenge, you know, for the metrics on transformation, including time series and also getting evidence that we are actually in a transition and to where. So secondly, I would like to reflect a little bit on the social part of this. You know, if we are in a radical socio-technical transformation, what does the social mean here? So social can be understood in different ways, and one way to understand it is in terms of the people, right? Another way of understanding it is in terms of the humans and non-humans. So I will talk first about the first understanding, which is people and relationships between people. So if we want a radical change happening, and that radical change is about sustainability, the dominant narrative of sustainability wants this change to happen outside people. I mean, if we think upon inside, like, you know, me as a person, as an individual, and something that is outside their nature or culture or society, whatever, the changes are expected to happen outside. However, for the changes to happen outside, they first need to happen inside, right? And until this point, we didn't have many data sources and tools to study at a larger scale what is going on in people's minds. But now we have more access to data sources that could help us to understand that. And using them is very important to see whether people really are having a change of mind, whether they are changing their minds and in which ways. So at this point, I would like to show just a very preliminary work that I'm conducting with a colleague here who is attending here as well, Ernesto Andrade. And I'm going to try here to share my screen. It's just, you know, a very preliminary analysis of some data sources that we think are important to understand people's imaginaries, okay? Because imagination for us can transform things in the future. If we imagine ourselves in the future, right? And if we change our imaginaries, then we can start to see transformations. So what we're doing is trying to analyze pictures, photographs, okay? The idea is to really get at the end of the project that we are trying to pursue.
One thing, we are not looking your presentations, we are looking the screen of the,
okay.
Zoom. So sorry for the interruption.
Let me see how can
I remember the time as well.
Oscar, yeah, I can see the presentation.
Okay, if it's just me, it's all right. If it is just me, it's all right. Yeah, just carry on, Diego. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, okay, so I don't have much time, so it's just an analysis, you know, of the pictures that are uploaded to Shutterstock. Shutterstock is a photography agency, so you can buy copyrights from this. And what do you use this for? You use this for news, for promotions, for, you know, advertising. So our idea is that we want to understand what photographers imagine when they think science, for instance. And we're getting these kind of representations, you know, that tell us the kind of things that are being shared in social media about science. What do people think about when they think about science? So they think about space, astronomy, etc. But also important in this picture is what is not there. You know, people are not getting much information about social sciences. If you look at this picture, people are more interested in, you know, in space sciences and astronomy. But what about, you know, climate change or social science? It's not really in the picture. We are doing this analysis of sources such as Instagram, and to look, you know, what are the commonalities between science, technology, science, imaginaries, in order to understand how people are perceiving these things. So I'm going to stop there the presentation, and I'm going to complete my next point. So the social as people, and then the social as non-humans. So Michel Calon has taught us that nature itself has a will, right? If you look at the works by Calon and Latour, we can see that the social is not only related to human beings. Basically, if you remember the story by Calon, fishermen need the cooperation of fish, you know, to be able to get together products. And then there are transactions between human and non-humans. And we have to remember that nature has a will of itself, which is realizing its full potential. And we are just part of this life that is happening. So how are we going to include, you know, the non-human here? Because the way we are doing it until this moment is very human-centered. Okay, sustainability is about human beings being able to survive in this world. But the reality is that human beings are only one of the beings in this planet. So how are we going to include, you know, the non-humans? That's another challenge that we got. And finally, about sustainability. Well, sustainability cannot be achieved only by innovation. So science, technology, or transformative innovation policy cannot do transformations in society. It needs of other policies and collaboration with other domains in society in order to really exert a transformation. So we have to take into account that the methods and the metrics that we are using should incorporate knowledge not only in other disciplines, but also in other domains of society that are not only related to science, technology, and innovation. And finally, all this, all this knowledge that we produce on transformations should pass through the lenses of ethics, because if we are starting to understand much better how to influence people's decisions, and that puts a burden and responsibility on researchers and people who influence others. So to what extent are we really legitimated to accept certain opinions, to make certain changes happen, should be also discussed, and so ethics should be brought up to the analysis of transformative change and metrics. So those were my points. I will leave it there, and thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you, Diego. Very thoughtful points. I have my neo-human here every day to remember. And it makes sense as well. So please, Gaston, if you can start, please.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar. I hope you can hear me well. So thanks for the invitation, and also thanks for the inspiring previous speakers. A bit intimidating. It's a very broad topic, very interesting, very intriguing topic that you put on the agenda for us. So, so I didn't prepare some slides, but I can share some of my reflections a bit on the themes that that were mentioned today. And I think a good starting point is the three frames that you introduced, Oscar, and also you raised the question whether they are still relevant. And I think the answer is yes. So they are also kind of there's also an historical sequence in these three frames. So starting with the linear model, which became very dominant in the post-war years, science, the endless frontier. And why is it still relevant now? In the sense that it is a very intuitive story, and it's also very generic, and it basically points at market failures, and most importantly, in the context of our work, the market failure associated with knowledge as a public good. So there's not enough knowledge produced by society itself because because knowledge is a public good, so it can be appropriated by everyone, and so in that sense it still serves a very important purpose. The model it's also very simple, very accessible for policymakers, and it provides very a clear rationale for very generic policy interventions that I think are still needed in society. So the second frame is more an innovation system, and that is indeed more about what is the constellation of actors and rules and institutions in which kind of innovations emerge, and the policy questions there are associated with questions like, so what are the bottlenecks for developing innovations, for diffusions of innovations? So is there a lack of knowledge? Are there rules or regulations that prevent the adoption, or etc.? So this is, of course, in many ways, it emerged in the 1980s, also in response to some kind of historical transition to a new socio-technological paradigm, as you wish. So it's interesting in that sense as well. And I think it has also provided us with many valuable insights, but as has been pointed out, it is also a lot more complex to derive clear lessons. There are no universal lessons following from an innovation system approach. It's always about the situation at a given moment, at a given situation, a given location. So, and then the third frame is historically, again, coming in a later stage, and it further complicates the picture, literally. So it is not only about innovations anymore. It's about, as was pointed out also by Diego, it's about a broader societal system. So it's no longer innovation as the unit of analysis, but it is about a socio-technical system in which kind of new constellations need to emerge. So it's also about the discontinuation of existing frameworks, rules, institutions, companies that, and again, so this makes the picture more complex, and the policy lessons that we can learn from them are even more complicated. So that brings me then to the next point. And I think one of the most powerful metaphors that has been introduced in innovation studies is by Richard Nelson about the moon and the ghetto. And that also kind of serves as, I think, a very good example to discuss metrics for transformative change. So basically, in a kind of very important contribution, Nelson basically said, yeah, how is it possible that we can put a man on the moon, but we cannot solve the problem of the ghetto? And I think that this is a very core question, and in part that question is still on the table for us as researchers. But it's extremely relevant, I think, for the discussion we have today, because it's part of the answer is, why is the ghetto problem not solved? So the problem of inequality, of poverty, of social injustice. And part of the problem, part of the issue there is that it's a wicked problem. So the problem is not clearly defined. Different perspectives exist next to each other about what exactly the problem is. Different solutions can be proposed, and so that is also, I think, another key insight is that we need to keep it complex, as Andy Sterling said in one of his famous contributions in a Nature publication. So we as analysts, informing policymakers, we need to keep it complex. We should resist the temptation to reduce the complexity of the phenomena we are trying to study and to articulate. So that brings me then to the next point. So my own research, also together with you, Oscar, I'm developing models and indicators mostly associated with knowledge production. So again, the three frames can still all be useful from an analytical and a policy perspective, I believe. And I think indeed, so to give one dominant line of research that you also in your framework was clearly positioned in the third frame, in the transition framework, is yeah, so we see that if we look at a portfolio of knowledge that exists in a firm or in a region or in a country around the topic, we see that there's path and place dependency in acquiring new ideas. So basically, the existing body of knowledge, to a large extent, determines what new knowledge can be adopted. So it is, and that, I think, provides really intriguing starting points for analysis. And one kind of prominent set of analysis is also social network analysis. So how can indeed different ideas be brought together? And that is again also an answer to your question about mixed methods. Yes, I think it's very important to use different methods. So about the mechanisms that facilitate these changes in the networks that we observe. So what drives these changes, and how do they inform then new insights about the formation of new combinations, and what policy lessons can we learn from that? So I think time-wise I should leave it at this for the moment, but I'll be happy to follow up on any of these points if there are questions.
Thank you very much, Gaston. So we have like 10 minutes more. So I want to invite the participants to make questions. If no is any participant, also Diego, Elisa, Gaston, feel free to make questions each other. And if you don't have any questions, so I can make a question, but I really want that you try to participate, and participants, so between you have like, Diego, I know you, I know that you have like some reactions to the stuff that Gaston was saying, so you want also to make a question, or some of the participants, please feel free to do it.
Oscar, we have here at the chat some questions.
Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Okay, Vipachi, if you want to raise your voice, I think that is better just to read your question, but I think that she's asking for some literature, so I don't know if it's really a direct question for the public, but
yeah, I could try to answer that question that Vipachi is asking, because she talks about systematic understanding of connections between humans and non-humans, literature on that. So my question, I will answer with a question: what is systematic? Because systematic for me is following a system to do research, system to collect data, interpret it, and answer research questions. So the end literature, at least if you look at some of the Calon's work, I would consider that a very systematic study. Calon's work, for instance, on scallops and the translation, sociology of translation, he calls it, took around 10 years of observations, of systematic, careful observations of one case, okay? But it was a systematic observation. So I would say this idea of systematic versus non-systematic, probably meaning, quantitative versus qualitative, I don't think exists. So if the question is more about, quantitative studies between relationship between human and non-human, we think, in terms of quantitative studies, there's a lot to do, especially in the imaginaries literature. Most of the imaginaries literature is focused on case studies, which is good. I mean, I don't think there is such a great division between the qualitative and the quantitative. I would say the greatest difference is a matter of scale. So every time you think about quality, you automatically think about quantity. And if you do quantitative studies, you are also thinking about quality.
Yeah.
It's important to understand, that subjectivity plays an important role in research. Even if you do quantitative studies, you have to decide how to classify your variables. This is always a qualitative decision. For instance, GDP. GDP will always have a number, okay? You cannot change the number, but what changes is how you interpret it, how you use it. For instance, in an evaluation framework, is GDP an enabler? Is it an input? Is it an output? This is a mainly qualitative decision that the researcher is doing. So qualitative studies are always embedded into quantitative studies. Now, the fact that you use numbers to do a study doesn't mean that it is quantitative. Quantity relates to the extent, to a measure of how much. And many studies fail in answering these kind of questions. Many econometric studies, for instance, only answer yes or no questions, but they use numbers. So they take different variables, relate them, and say, this variable is statistically related to this one. Is that a quantitative question? That is a yes/no question. Not many studies say, look, these two variables are related, are significant, but are related to this extent. So, this thing about, systematic, non-systematic, qualitative, non-quantitative, I think we have to be better positioned to understand that these two ways of understanding are always related. I'm not saying that there is no qualitative or no quantitative studies, but I think they are closer than we think.
Yeah, but sorry, my reaction about that is that, we have like this quantitative and qualitative dimension of the studies, but it's also true that the notion of probability is very dominant in terms of the quantitative method. So how you can compare like two different samples and make a conclusions around that. So I think that more that you design is also how you raise conclusion. And I think that is a difference between quantitative and qualitative methods that really shape different the things that you are saying. I don't know if we have another question, sorry. Or if no, I can make a question. Or Elisa.
Yes, Caetano has a...
Caetano, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you very much for the interventions. I like them all, very inspiring. But I have a question for Elisa, which is about the position of mixed methods in a social network analysis methodology. So design decisions, whether do you usually first approach the network with qualitative methods and then use those insights to define how you will approach it quantitatively, or vice versa? So how do you combine those methods? So is there a standard approach that you use, or is it the case by case? Could you?
Well, in general, I would probably say that the reason why social network analysis is perceived as being quantitative is that it does extensively use statistical methods. So it's very common to find papers that use ERGM models or Siena models, and they're highly statistical and highly mathematical. And hence you have this perception that network analysis tend to be more quantitative than qualitative. In terms of the balance between the two, it really depends on each research study that you're doing. So for example, in some cases, the combination is the aim of the combination is to produce typologies. So a classic example is EgoNet studies, where you would collect data qualitatively with interviews to people, but then you will also have a network component of this interview, and you look at the structure of your network, and then you create typologies of the network structure. So you will have a data collection that is qualitative, then you would have a quantitative analysis of the network, and then you will inform the interpretation of these typologies using your qualitative data. So for example, you might have that some people have very sparse networks or very dense networks with different components, and you would use your qualitative data to inform that. In some other cases, so for example, very recently, I had a meeting today about a research project I'm working on. We are collecting data in villages in isolated rural areas of India. So the idea we had at the beginning was that we were going into these villages doing qualitative data collection first, trying to understand, what's the general feeling of the village, who is important, and then we would go on to construct the network map. So the network data collection was supposed to come after, and the quantitative analysis was supposed to come after the qualitative data collection and analysis. And then we realized halfway through it didn't work like that, because we needed to go first to collect the network data. While collecting the network data, people would tell us about dynamics, conflicts, people who are important, people they don't like, and then we could have gone in with the interviews. So now we flip the methodology the way around, and we hope that it's going to work in a better way. So sometimes, as in any type of qualitative study, especially if you don't really know about your field, you'll end up changing your strategy while you are collecting the data. So I wouldn't say that. So when you do mixed methods, you try to think in terms of like, what type of data am I collecting? Are they quantitative or qualitative? And then you do the analysis, and again, you can have qualitative and quantitative analysis. So the way in which you mix the two, it really depends on the research questions that you are investigating, but also like on how much time and how much flexibility in the design you might have, because you might also have like sequential data collection and data analysis when you start with the network, then you do some interviews, then you go back and do another network bit. So it really depends on each research project.
Okay, thank you, Elisa.
Right,
thank you, Gaston and Diego. I think that we don't have more time. Actually, it was like 5 minutes more. So sorry, my colleagues, about the timing. Sorry, Gabriel. So if we can carry on with the agenda, thank you again, Elisa, Gaston, and Diego. I think that this was like very useful for the discussion today, and really appreciate your help and for being here. Thank you.
Well,
Gabriel,
Oscar, Thank you, Oscar. Oscar, thank you very much for this excellent session. Diego, Elisa, Gaston, thank you very much for being with us. Before we go the coffee break, we want to present you the people who is going to comment the next sessions. Remember, we have 4 different sessions. Oscar, please, you can share. I have problems with my screen. Can you share the program, please?
Yes, give me a second, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have 4 sessions. We already sent you the link. This is the link, but you choose some of the sessions that you want to go. Automatically, you are going to be there. We are going to send you like a link. I think it's a link or something like that. You only have to accept, and you will go to your own session. Then when the time is finished, 1 hour and 15 minutes, automatically we come back here to this session, to the main session. Well, we have 4 commentators. This is I'm going to ask for the commentators that present their sessions, but first I'm going to present them. We have 4 distinguished academics here. First, at the 5th session, we have José Luis Molina. He is a full professor of social and cultural anthropology at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. He is one of the most prominent academics in social network analysis in the Hispanic world, I think. He and Isidro Maya leads Redes, the leading journal growth in Spanish language about social network analysis. I think that José Luis is very important for many starting academics in Latin America because he is a promoter of this kind of analysis here at the region, not only in Latin America, but in Spain and Portugal and Brazil, basically. Eliana Martinez is the commentator of the 2nd session. You think you can see this session as 6? The 6th session is, she is a PhD in public health. She works as a consultant for the Vice Chancellor of the Research Office at the University of Antioquia. She has been an essential support for policymakers in Colombia in public health and sanitary emergencies. I think that she is very important. For example, she's working right now with the regional government as a in their scientific committee, trying to solve some climate emergencies here at the region and attending the corona virus emergency, basically. Well, the 7th session is commented by Pablo Patiño. Pablo Patiño, he is a full professor of the Faculty of Medical Science at the University of Antioquia. He has been Vice Chancellor of the 3rd mission at the University of Antioquia. Here at Latin America, we call this mission Extension. It's one of the missions of the universities here at Latin America. Besides, he has been the Director of Promotion of Research at the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, before called Colciencias, and he led one of the groups commissioned to change the actual model of science, technology and innovation, called Misión de Sabios. Pablo is going to comment this session, but after he's going to present or to close our workshop with some words. The last session, the 8th session, you know this session for the 8th. Alejandro Balanzó is going to comment this session. He's an associate researcher at the Universidad Externado de Colombia. He is a PhD on governance from the University of Twente. He's an expert in participatory methods, and he has an important trajectory in consultancy to governments and other institutions in policymaking design. Well, those are our commentators for the sessions. Thank you very much to them to do this task, very important for us. I think that we have excellent commentators for these sessions. And please, I want to you present the sessions briefly. Only you have to maybe talk about the titles of the presentations and some of the contents. The first session, the session 5, mapping transformations, it's going to be commented by Jose Luis Molina. I'm going to comment only one of the papers, the last one from Siddhartha, but please, Jose Luis, give us
okay.
some comments.
So thank you. So good morning there in Colombia. Hello, everybody. First, I want to thank Gabriel Vélez for his kind invitation and presentation, for participating in this interesting workshop as commentator of the session 5, mapping transformation. I had the opportunity to review 3 of the papers, and I think you, Gabriel, are going to discuss the last one, right? Okay. So the first paper, mapping research in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals by Hugo Confraria and Tommaso Ciarli, I hope I pronounced it, Ciarli, compares the scientific production, the global scientific production related to the 17 United Nations goals across countries. This research shows that the global scientific production is unevenly distributed across these development goals, and that on average, lower income countries are more specialized in this type of research than higher income countries, among other interesting issues we can comment later. The second paper, mapping transformative partnerships towards a relational understanding of partnerships and networks driving energy transitions, by Lena Haspersen, University of Leeds, presented tools for social network analysis for participatory research. This method uses sociograms as a means for achieving a shared understanding of a complex scenario by key actors in a given sector, energy in this case. This methodology has proven to be useful in many different sites across the world, and also I think now in the field of transformative methodologies. I'm looking forward to this presentation. The third one was a tool for mapping quality and constraints of transformative outcomes by B. Gosh, of University of Sussex. Present 2 short questionnaires for assessing both the quality and the constraints of some transformative outcomes. This paper is in fact part of a global theoretical proposal by Gosh with 12 different processes, and this proposal is really worth to have into consideration. As you can see, we have different papers and a good base for discussion, but please, Gabriel.
Jose Luis, thank you. The last one shortly is from Siddhartha Sarin, Legitimating Power, Solar Energy Rollout, Sustainability Metrics and Transition Politics. I'm only going to say that Siddhartha presents an exciting and novel proposal to understand the play of measurements as instruments of legitimacy. In this sense, the author presents a frame to analyze how accountability is the central concept of defining different measures. I think that this is a very interesting paper because he is trying to present measures in a different way, not the measures itself or themselves, but all the context that build the measures, and try to understand how the measures impact in the decision-making processes. The next session is session 6. It's for
systems transitions. Yes, next slide, okay, please. Okay, thank you, Gabriel. Now we have in this session, we will see, and we will enjoy it, 4 interesting papers and reflections coming mainly from Brazil, Universidade de Pelotas, as you can see it, number 2, 3, and 4, from Share City. That is a very interesting project, I think so. What really I want to tell in this moment is that we will have a very rich session on the subject, as you can see it, 4 presentations, and that answer a question, how to analyze incremental and radical change. I prefer to think on how to move from theoretical and technical frameworks to social frameworks, because ensuring food will always be a great challenge. Hunger is increasing, poor nutrition is presented, malnutrition much more, and it will not only be the task of industry to respond to it, but of the entire food chain and system. I read with a great enthusiasm the text of the cases analyzed around Creole beans, frijoles, feijoada, and butia, that is o gênero de palmeiras que ocorre na América do Sul, and poultry production niche of age-free housing. Fantastic. And also sharing city. And I wondered how transitions emerge in our cultural context under the influence of the global north, or give solutions to our reality by understanding the level of social interaction. Maybe a lot of questions will be appear after this session. But talking about food systems niche cases, my thoughts related with COVID-19 is that many agroecologists have commended efforts to attempt to understand infection disease from broader ecological context. However, ecological studies divorced from their historical, political, social, and economic context reproduce long-standing colonial notions of people and landscapes. This is another challenge we cannot leave out of our reflections. Just staying in contact, maybe with, after this session, with Alvin, Marcelo, Eduardo, and Telmo. And thank you, Gabriel. Very short because we need time and quickly for the session.
Okay, here at this session, it will be Marta Liliana Marin, who is the moderator of this session. She's going to be the chief of this session. The next one is Pablo. Pablo, please, are you there?
Hello? You hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Oscar, for the invitation to take up part of this workshop. It's very interesting for me. I am not expert in this area. I am a PhD in immunology, and some years ago I started to be involved in science and technology policy matter, but now it's a different aspect for me. But I'm happy to understand, to study about this. I have a lot of questions, more than comments about the papers, but it's my opportunity to learn about that. In this session, we have 3 papers. The first one is a functional approach for evaluating transformative innovation policy, indicators and metrics by Carolina Resende and Anna Berg. These authors have developed an alternative framework in the previous work, try to understand or to capture both directionality and behavioral additionality. Now, in this paper, they want to develop this framework further by suggesting a set of metrics that can be used to access the functions and structural process empirically. These are 2 different aspects. The first one is a starting point to try to collect the typical indicators for analyzing the functions of innovation systems and potential metrics for adding directionality. So this, I think, is a typical or a classic analysis of innovation systems. But the most important thing for me is the new or different potential indicators and metrics for analyzing complementary niche and regime processes. These have been derived from empirical descriptions of transition process, and therefore to be seen more several examples as to analyze more, I think, qualitative indicators. And the second paper is operationalizing the mission and incentives towards recreating green capital in the production of net sustainability outputs by Amy Bardet. It's very interesting to learn about these monitoring and evaluation tools need to integrate to respond to the challenge of capturing progress towards the sustainable development goals. This is very important here, and this paper has sought to depict assisting to of interlocking and reinforcing sociality and ecology transformative mechanisms to engender possible sustainably powered constellations. So this, I think we will be learn a lot how could our municipalities and regions could improve these indicators for green capital. And the third one was the evolution of R&I paradigms and associated evaluation and the indicators frameworks by Christoph Brodny, Michael Dingens, Martina Nylander. This paper provides an overview of the development of R&I policy paradigms over time. These authors analyze the three different paradigms: the classic one, the science and technology; the second one is the innovation systems; and the third one is the transformative innovation policy, as I think is the most important thing of this paper. And they analyze from two different aspects: overview of R&I monitoring and evaluation system, and overview of indicators for this different kind of paradigms. It will be very interesting for the people to understand this approach of these authors. Thank you, Gabriel. I think I insist I will be a learning in this session. Thank you.
No, thank you, Pablo. At this session, it will be Oscar Romero here with you.
I need the help of Oscar in this.
he will be with you. Well, the next session and the last one is for Alejandro Balanzó. Alejandro, are you there?
Yes, here I am.
Okay. Hi, Alejandro. Please go.
Thank you, Gabriel. Well, so this is the last wagon of the train. So this means we will be having a lot of fun. Here we have actually three very interesting reflexive papers about co-creation and participatory methods. Not just, I would say, let's not to...
Sorry, Alejandro. Please,
Yes.
Oscar, can you change the slide, please? Oscar. Okay. Sorry, Alejandro. Sorry.
It's okay. So we will be discussing three papers about co-creation and participatory methods. I would say not to understand, but to tackle, to initiate, to ignite sustainability transitions. And then I think we will be having a very interesting discussion about what are the space taking place between the project and the program level, and then the possibility of niches or regimes. As I said, we have three very reflexive papers. The first one discusses a case about a policy tool, which is an indicator index with a gender perspective for innovation in Spain. So Paula will be presenting her reflections on that experience and then maybe possible steps forward. Second, we have a paper from Andrea, Germán, Elizabeth, and Christian. Here we have a community-sized process taking place in Girón, in Colombia, which it's been going on for a long while. And they've been working on a way to assess the progress. So it will be very interesting to see how aims of social inclusion then can also link to further socio-technical transformations. And third, we have a paper by Carla Palacino. She will be presenting about an ongoing process, which very interestingly has been has had a great impact from the pandemics. So they have this support service-oriented project program, which has been evolving, supporting 3 different initiatives in very different ways. So it's also called from these challenges of diversity while dealing with trying to ignite sustainability transitions. So we will be having a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting. So you're very most welcome to this session.
Well, Alejandro, thank you very much. Well, this is the most complicated part of the workshop, the technical part. We have to distribute you in the different sessions. We are going to have a coffee break. This coffee break is for 15 minutes. We are a little bit delayed, but I think we are on time for all the activities at the workshop. Well, it's 9:30 here in Colombia. In UK, it must be 3:30 if the world is not changed. And at the Holland, I think it's 4:30. In 15 minutes, we are going to find each other here again. And we are going to begin this. If you have any problem with trying to enter some session, please write us here at the chat, and we surely we are going to solve all the problems that you have trying to get reaching your session. No, you don't have to stay online. I think, Carla, but you are going
to carry on being online, Gabriel. If you don't have any reason to leave, don't leave. Just stay here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's better because if we are moving people and they are not connected, then we are gonna have trouble, Gabriel.
But of course, if you have to go to the bathroom to take
no, but you
coffee,
just, I mean, like turn off the camera and turn off the microphone, and then you can go to the loo. That's, that's the way to do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and please feel free to make all your questions, comments at the chat, and we'll see you in 15 minutes, hopefully in our sessions. Yes,
additional
Oscar,
thing. One of the breaking section is no breaking section, so we carry on being in this in the main platform. You know what I mean? So you are not going to move to another section. You are going to carry on being here. It's a section with Pablo Patiño and me. So is number 8, I think? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
your session is 7.
15 minutes for resting time.
Okay, thank you. See you in a while.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Gabriel.
Hi, Oscar. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your coffee. I hope that you had a nice cup of coffee on this minute. Well, I think that Mauricio, can we begin the translation, the transfer to all these people of this to all sessions?
Yes.
Please. Well, we are.
You were. It's not anymore here.
Oscar, listo. Ya todas las personas están siendo redirigidas y solo acá se queda la sesión 7. Sería bueno que definiéramos si alguna persona de los que permanece acá necesita ser redirigida a alguna de las sesiones. Por favor.
Okay, let me ask first. If any of you want to go to another section, it is the moment to raise the issue. So Mauricio Castaño can help us to do that. So write to him or just say it now and we can help you. If not, we can start with this section. If any of you are moving. Sorry, I have a person here that is called Gabriel Vélez Cuartas. So I think that it is not Gabriel. So if you can give me your name, I can rename you with your real name.
Rocío, ya ella nos puso por acá en el chat.
Okay, okay, perfect. So
Ya la voy a cambiar.
So, okay, so I guess that we can start. Okay, first I want to know if we have the researchers that are presenting today. So it's here Carolina, I can see you. Carolina, you're there. Ami Burnett is here. I can see Ami here. Okay, Christoph, I can not see Christoph either. I think that we have a problem. Maybe they are on other tables. Let me ask Mauricio. Mauricio, tú puedes mirar si en otra mesa está Ami Burnett. Ya te escribo acá los nombres y Christoph Brocknick, porque tienen que presentar acá y no están.
Ami está acá. Ami Burnett está acá en esta sala.
Ok.
¿Y quién más?
Christoph. Christoph is not here.
No. Y
ya te
tampoco
escribo
está
el apellido de él. Yo creo que Ami está tomando café o algo.
Christoph no está en ninguna de las salas, no está conectado.
Huh. Okay. So we have more time for discussion then. Okay, so I think that we can start with the section. So we have, like, as Pablo said before, like 3 presentations. I'm gonna try to figure out what is happening with Christoph. I'm gonna write a message to him. But meanwhile, we can start with the presentations. So yesterday I tried to make all people to present themselves, but then we have time for discussion. So what I'm proposing today, is first to have the presentations, and when you have your questions, you can introduce yourself if you want. So we can have like more time for discussion and as well for the presentation. So Carolina, please, you have 10 minutes. I will tell you when you have like 2 minutes left. So say sorry in advance for the interruption at that moment.
No worries.
Just please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oscar. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the
good.
presentation.
So good morning for some and good afternoon for others. I'm Carolina. I'm a PhD student at Chalmers University of Technology. And the short paper is actually a further development of a first paper where we developed a framework for evaluating transformative innovation policy. And here I wanted to focus on indicators and metrics. So it's a work in progress, and like every comment and on the metrics and indicators especially are very welcome. Past reviews show that innovation policy evaluation lags behind advances in innovation theory. As some colleagues have already mentioned in this workshop, and the emergence of transformative innovation policy, which aims at addressing grand challenges, and is also seen as a new paradigm by some and as a new frame of innovation policy by others. It brought some additional challenges to evaluation, which we can mention among others, how to assess directionality of change and behavior additionality. And here I would like to highlight that behavior additionality was already an issue in systemic evaluations, but not solely addressed in practice so far. And we also have some current frameworks that have been proposed and used, for example, the technological innovation system functions or the transformation system failures. And for instance, taking Kivimas and Kern's paper, they proposed the addition of stabilizing functions to the original set of functions proposed by Bergek and others. And these frameworks, they brought important insights to evaluation of transformative innovation policy already, but they still don't capture challenges such as directionality and behavior additionality. But some, they already highlight the analytical capacity of the technological innovation system functions. And in the previous papers, our purpose was to enhance the analytical capacity of the technological innovation system functions framework to address the current transformative innovation policy evaluation challenges by highlighting how directionality can be captured within the current functions and complementing the existing functions with a set of non-overlapping niche and regime level processes. And in this paper, more specifically, we wanted to develop this framework further by suggesting a set of metrics that can be used to assess the functions and structural process empirically. Just going back to the theoretical starting points, this was also highlighted by other colleagues in the workshop. We have the science, technology, and innovation policy. Both policy theory and program theory have been deeply rooted in innovation theory and on the notion of market or systems failures. And mainly in practice, we still use input and output additionality as measures and the idea of accountability. And
Carolina, sorry for the interruption, but we are having troubles to hear you well. I think that maybe is the headphones that you are using. So
okay,
it's a lot of noise there and it's very difficult to get what you are saying, sorry.
Oh, there is an extra noise?
Yeah, it's almost the same. Maybe you don't use them?
Oh, let me see if I can do that. Let's see if it improves. Can you hear me better?
It's almost the same, but just carry on. I mean, I can understand you, but the noise is a little bit annoying, but just go ahead.
Now I can't hear you actually. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just carry on and try to move yourself a lot when you move.
Yes, maybe, yeah, it's my distance to the computer probably. Sorry about that. Can you hear me better now, right?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I try to be like more close to the computer then. Let me know if you can't hear me again, please. Thank you. So when we talk about transformative innovation policy, we now see that both policy theory and program theory are mainly influenced not only by innovation theory, but also by transition theory. As we can see, for example, with the transformational systems failures, where the authors brought the idea of the multi-level perspective to the original market and systems failures. And also, again, we have the challenges of addressing directionality and behavior additionality. So in the previous papers, we argue that in the context of transformative innovation policy, evaluation should not only focus on outputs, but also explain how specific interventions cause certain impacts on target systems and take feedback loops into account. And our proposed framework was composed mainly by 3 components, in which the first component would involve the program theory, where we would have like the goals and intended direction of the program, and also the outcomes and expected impacts. And the second component would be the functions with directionality. And here we take the original set of functions as proposed by Bergek and others in 2008. But the focus here is rather than on the level of specific technologies or industries, we wanted to focus on a societal sector, and we wanted to incorporate the directionality aspect more explicitly in the framework. And the functions, they are intended to capture innovation processes related to the establishment and the emerging socio-technical systems related to a specific societal sector. And the third component would involve niche structural aspects related to niche development processes and regime processes. As you can see listed in the pictures, I won't go through each of them right now because of time. But they weren't captured before by the functions, and we try to account for overlaps between niche and regime processes that we found in the literature with the functions. And this is basically a summary and from the literature and different empirical applications. So here you can see the whole framework, and we have that together, both components 2 and 3. They form a framework for analyzing behavior additionality in terms of how they can help us analyze the system's performance. And underlying program theory, we have directionality, which leads to also the direction of change. So with regard to the metrics, we summarized mainly that from the literature, and also the nature of the indicators suggests that an evaluation should focus on a broad analysis of the functions and structural processes, but this would also require complete and broad qualitative system analysis, which might not be feasible, especially in the real setting. So we might need to revert back to the more simple metrics. Here I want to point out all of the metrics and indicators that we identified. There is a list in the paper if you want to check. And just to highlight some aspects, in order to address directionality, we focused on questions such as what, why, and for whom, and by whom. So for example, if we take knowledge development and diffusion, which is the first function of the framework, we would ask what kind of knowledge is being developed and diffused, and why and for whom are they being developed and diffused, and by whom. Another example, for example, we take market formation, typical metrics would involve, for example, analyzing the size and the components of niche markets and the introduction of technology standards. And in terms of directionality indicators, we would ask ourselves, what kind of market is being formed, and why is this market being formed, and for whom, and by whom is the market being formed. And we can take resource mobilization, and we can ask what kind of resources are being mobilized, or why and for whom are they being mobilized, and by whom are resources being mobilized. And we also have legitimation and development of positive externalities. Now moving to niche processes and later on to regime processes. Here, what we find in the literature are more empirical applications and examples of what we could look for. In relation to the niche processes, we identified, for example, in relation to formation of networks, supply chains, and relationships, we look for evidence of formation of discourse coalitions, the formation of global networks, and the support from societal sectors. And in relation to lobbying and framing, we could look for evidence of questions raised around the desirability of technologies or signs of overcoming initial reluctance. And we also have regulatory change. But moving to regime processes, again, we could look for, for example, in relation to entry of new actors into mainstream markets, the entry of new actors or entry of new actors from other industries or even other countries. And we have other regime processes here. Oh, sorry, I skipped that one. But let's take another example, like changes in existing regulations and standards. We could look for evidence of changes in regulations that favor established technologies and attempts to influence policy development and change. As I said, you can go to the paper. There is a whole list of indicators and possible indicators that we suggested. And please refer to our come up with suggestions, they are very welcome at this point. That's what we want to discuss in this workshop. And just some final remarks. In this short paper, we wanted to highlight possible indicators and metrics to assess the identified functional and structural transition processes outcomes. And we see that we need still to go beyond the output-like measures and create new indicators to better capture transformative outcomes. And we see many challenges ahead. And we want to go back to the policy evaluation literature to see like different perspectives on causality, because I think that's an issue now when we discuss evaluation of transformative innovation policy. And we also have to deal with the complexity of the framework and how useful the framework would be for policymakers and policy practitioners. And we still need to talk to them. Yesterday we had a session about this, where we talked about the importance of translating the academic terms to the real world and to policymakers. And we haven't applied the framework yet in an empirical setting. So that's our next step. Also, and we might need encounter some operationalization issues in the process. So that was that from my side. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Carolina. Is Amy here? Amy, sorry. Amy,
yeah.
Amy, the floor is yours, Amy. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, great. I'm also going to share my screen. So I'll turn my video on as well so you can see me. Okay. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Right. I apologize for the rather long and complicated title, but yeah, so this presentation is around an idea about green capital, and not just the idea around metrics, but also the kind of wider mechanisms that you might need to encourage incentives around operationalizing their measurement, so that you can kind of create a circular economy which is based on positive reinforcing sustainability outcomes as well. So that's why it was slightly long. So just by way of an introduction from where this kind of idea came from, I've been kicking it around for quite a while, but it's kind of evolved over time. So I originally, let me just move that so you can see it. So in 2012, I wrote a couple of papers with somebody called Tristan Stubbs, and these papers were looking at a kind of redistributed nature of how you can encourage monitoring and evaluation and incentives towards promoting green citizenship. And there are a couple of really interesting papers that I came across which kind of shaped my thinking a little bit around that time. And one was around the capitals framework, which was by Flora and Flora, where they kind of had, they went to communities and they measured all the different types of capitals which a community might or might not have. And there's another paper which was by Figgy and Han, called Sustainability. It introduces notion around sustainability capital, which is quite similar to green capital in the way that it's kind of, they applied it more to the kind of private sector, but in a way that you have these reinforcing capital value, the value of sustainability in virtue of all the other capitals kind of interacting positively, and you could quantify that and define that. And then there was the idea around 2012 that the, sorry, my daughter's just banging on the window. There was also this notion in it's like policy instrument that didn't actually work out in the UK. It was called the Carbon Reduction Commitment, but it was basically an idea where you had people, like different companies, and was public sector mainly, but I think companies of a certain you know, like over 500 employees or something, would be on this carbon reduction commitment, which was basically an index where you had people who were kind of at the top. They wouldn't necessarily pay for kind of being at the top because they were producing sustainability benefits, but those at the bottom kind of had to pay a penalty, if you like. So it was this kind of idea around measuring and indexing people and then circulating taxation and positive benefits through this index. So these kind of ideas led to some thinking around, okay, well, maybe there could be a local sustainability index for communities or local government where you could kind of quantify and measure how well they were doing on certain sustainability initiatives or just more widely. And then you could link that to different forums that a local community might have. And I've also kind of thought about, okay, well, if there's a development needs platform, a notion of a platform where you could link different people with different needs to kind of understand how they can support each other, which could also possibly integrate this idea around indexing. And then if there was a community savings bank, this would enable you to kind of access and generate different resources, which didn't have to be money. They could be things like time banking, where you pay for people's time and you can have that kind of exchange. So it's all these kind of alternative mechanisms, if you like, that could kind of feed this idea around green capital, so to promote a circular economy, and also integrating some ideas that were coming out around ecosystem services. How do you measure that? And the idea around nature gain as well, which was somebody that I was collaborating with called Colin Tingle came up with, and there's subsequently been other ideas around how you can kind of value and quantify the benefits of nature, particularly in the UK at the moment with biodiversity net gain, which is going to become part of the planning system. It's where development has to contribute 10% or more to development when it takes place. There's also this idea in the UK called UK Furlough Go, which is an exchange for UK charity workers who are furloughed, so they've been unable to work during COVID, where they are basically able to match their unused skills and resources to support those who are unable to work. So basically, another thing is I've been involved in monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning with different NGOs and community groups over the past 15 years. So basically that's the introduction to where this is going. And I know that the paper that I wrote was slightly over 3,000 words, and it was less kind of academic heavy, but it's more a way of introducing some key ideas and kind of to discuss these kind of mechanisms. So I just want to outline what the key issues are and what the potential solutions might be, and then discuss this model around green capital and some of these linked mechanisms and how this could then create a circular economy. So some of the key things that we need to do is like to be able to promote a circular economy is to think around our own social economy and embed a kind of systems perspective where you can encourage action and monitoring outcomes in a more interdependent way across scales and sectors. And we need to kind of introduce mechanisms that encourage a kind of cascading of positive actions on climate change. So, you know, one thing that might encourage such be an incentive is like the idea around eco-currencies. And I know there's obviously been concern around borrowing these kind of financial discourses and practices. For instance, Avellino has said that that may affect the kind of transformative potential if you kind of borrow too much from the banking sector, etc. One of the other challenges is that community-led initiatives and government groups, governments around the world, sometimes find monitoring and evaluation quite an onerous process, and they may not have the necessary resources and knowledge to be evaluative, to be reflective, to apply the tools, to have the time to do it, to share information. And this whole thing around monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning can sometimes get missed out of the picture. And the other thing that's been mentioned today is a lack of systemic embedding of the SDGs at different scales and the interlinkages between them, and what kind of indicators are being used at a local level, not just the national level, but how are they being applied and measured in community groups. So one of the things, so this is kind of what green capital could look like. So it's basically a measurement of capitals. So a little bit like figure enhanced sustainability capital, where you can introduce a kind of multi-systemic set of indicators to help capture changes within and outside a system. It integrates ideas around measuring ecological value, but it goes beyond that to kind of consider things like that have been proposed in the Total Corporate Responsibility Initiative on high-level economic, social and political change kind of metrics. And if you could kind of integrate a way to assess how the strengths and weaknesses of different community groups, or they may be government, they may be private sector, to be able to see, you know, like a baseline of where they are in terms of promoting green capital, then that could be integrated as a kind of wider monitoring and evaluation system, but that is also kind of leading to stimulating positive action. So you hopefully get these kind of mutual reinforcing enhancements that can be quantified, incentivized and formalized. So, I mean, a definition which is a bit of a working one. So green capital is a form of capital that is produced when other forms of capital, for instance, political, social, natural and economic, act in tandem to produce a sustainable or green output or outcomes. So then you kind of get this re-evaluation potentially of societal systems and intersections of pathways and transformative governance capabilities and all the things that we are interested in seeing and studying. And here is quite a simplistic diagram of what it might look like. Obviously there's work to be done to kind of make this a little bit more robust, but it's just giving you the idea of what it could be like. So here are the different forms of capital. Maybe there's more that that need to be on here that aren't. And then when you can kind of quantify that these are acting to express a green capital, a kind of net sustainability benefit, then you could kind of have this value of green capital. And green capital doesn't necessarily need to be valued in monetary terms. It could be a social benefit. The idea is, and this is what needs a little bit of more work, is how can you generate a capital value, and then how is it then translated out? You know, when you quantify how much of something, how do you then access and translate it so that it is, you know, can access it and utilize it? So here is a kind of example of some possible mechanisms, some of the ones that I've already spoken about at the beginning, around how this could be the life cycle of green capital. So you may have a community savings bank. So this is where your time banking may go in. So, you know, you can measure how much time a person or a community is contributing towards an electric car club, or, you know, producing a sustainability plan or resilience plan or something. And you can then link it to a development needs platform where you know that you need more help on something, and that help need not be only in your community. You might want to, you know, say, for instance, if you have in Colombia, you might want to access a Spanish speaking support in you know, Spain or something like that. So it can go much beyond the scale of your community or your particular area to kind of leverage knowledge and resources that you need. And then it can link to things like citizens' assemblies as well. So you in the UK, there are more and more citizens' assemblies kind of starting out because of one of the demands of Extinction Rebellion. So they're becoming like a governance mechanism, as a kind of forum for communities to talk about sustainability. So things like that, I mean, they could be a normal forum that's linked to kind of municipal governance. Sorry, am I going on?
Yeah, you are out of the time, so you can conclude, please.
Okay, sure. Okay, great. So, and then this index idea. So yes, so can I just, yeah. So this is my last slide. So just whether green capital could be a transformative metric. So I think it could help rejuvenate local economies, identify misalignments between social needs, develop a platform to help with different contexts. And again, like we've talked about social network analysis, but that could help measure the current possible future structure of socio-technical networks. And you can embed like a health check and a monitoring process and a ranking. And you could possibly, to kind of track indicators over time, you could kind of embed tags with them so that you can have like a system. So it's not just social network analysis, but it's this kind of different indicators kind of talking to each other at different scales. If we had, you know, more integrated knowledge management tools. So that's basically a little bit about the idea of green capital. So if you want to, I'm currently trying to work with some people to operationalize some of these ideas. So if you fancy getting involved, then do let me know. And there's my email.
Thank you very much, Hani. Christoph, are you here?
Yes, I am
Okay.
here.
Very nice to see you, Christoph. So the floor is yours, please.
Thanks, and sorry for being a bit late to this session. I'll share my screen with you guys. So thanks everyone for participating, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a history tour, I suppose, of the development of research and innovation policy monitoring and evaluation systems, and that is very much based on the 3 frames of innovation policy by Schott and Steinmüller of 2018. And what we try to do is we try to group the different monitoring and evaluation systems according to these 3 different paradigms of frames. I'll briefly talk you through this, and then particularly also focusing on the 3rd frame, the transformative innovation policy frame, and the work that we are currently doing in this respect. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues here, Michael Dinges and Martina Neuländer, some of which are participating on YouTube as far as I know. Just briefly, you can look at the PDF. It's much more detailed than obviously this presentation, but what we wanted to do is to give an exploratory review of how monitoring and evaluation systems have developed over time vis-a-vis these 3 frameworks. We want them to understand what's currently missing, particularly in the 3rd framework, and we drew on a variety of indicators within that 3rd framework to provide some inspiration going forward, developing indicators for transformative innovation policy. Starting with this first frame or paradigm, R&I paradigm called science and technology, very much around sort of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the evaluation system under this paradigm were very much driven by a market failure rationale. The intervention for policy was very much about public R&I spending and leveraging the effects of private sector spending. The evaluation focused on the effectiveness, usually of input and output additionality, usually by means of ex-post analysis that used counterfactual, econometric, and bibliometric analysis. Key challenges for evaluation of R&I policy at that time was around the information on impacts and how factors that turn an intervention into success. Indicators at that time heavily influenced by the first Frascati manual and then all its additional reformulations and extensions. And in its first version, it was very much focused on national statisticians, and they're providing a standardized measure and accounting framework for them. It excluded a large number of activities typically associated with the development part of R&D, and it was heavily input oriented. I think one of the most well-known indicators that comes from this time is the GERD, which is the gross domestic expenditure of a nation on R&D. It broadened over time. Business schools, economists provided more and more input, and non-R&D related activities started to be incorporated into the Frascati manual, so it enlarged its view over time. It got revised. Output indicators, previously only input indicators or predominant input indicators, and then output indicators also were being used, such as patents, technology payments, and so on. Coming to the second paradigm, the innovation system paradigm, the rationale for public intervention for R&I policy at that time was very much a market failure one, which comes from the old one, but it got layered on top with that innovation system failure approach. So the argumentation was that the innovation system, the structural qualities of the innovation system are not great, and policy needs to adjust the structural characteristics of the innovation system. Evaluation of R&I policy was then starting to focus on the interactions between different types of actors, and in particular science and industry. What also moved to the focus was the absorptive capacity of particular actors in that innovation system, but also the knowledge flows between them. The focus of evaluation the focus of evaluation was the cognitive capacities and the behavioral additionality of agents for resolving exploration and exploitation. The key challenges at that time was the consideration of all these external factors in an innovation system and to go beyond the R&I system itself, such as sectoral systems of innovation that also play into that. The indicators in paradigm 2, the existing indicator sets was deemed as insufficient to capture the complexity of innovation system. We saw the emergence of different innovation surveys that popped up in different countries that all, to a different extent, try to capture these knowledge flows between entities, between actors. New concepts came onto the scene: globalization of research activities, networks of collaborators, clusters, the role of users, new indicators associated with that. Again, looking at the relationship between actors, inter-firm research cooperation being one indicator, cooperative industry, university R&D, and all of this got packaged up and became also institutionalized in the Oslo Manual, which harmonized these different innovation output indicators that popped up in the different surveys. Coming to the third paradigm, the transformative innovation policy paradigm, and this is still very much in the making, but there are some principles that we can already see and distill from the literature. The rationale for R&I policy in this paradigm is the market and the innovation system failure as being the old layers, but a new layer being on top of that. And that's the transformation failures. So the transformation challenge rationale becomes now a central argument for R&I policy, more and more so. The focus of the intervention of R&I policy is now a long-term focus, and it's a policy mix that have this transitory purpose and transformational change purpose. And what also moves into the intervention focus is the support and the creation of new or adjusted institutional arrangements and framework conditions, also governance structures that are more conducive to sustainability transitions. The focus of the evaluation itself is on the socio-technical system. The evaluation approach is participatory, and it's more a formative type of approach where learning and the generation of strategic intelligence are more and more in the center. The challenges, of course, and my previous speaker has already mentioned this, is the complexity of interactions, the causalities between policy mixes, actors within the system, but also the exchanges between the external environment. What we're trying to do is to think about possible indicators in that space. We have used here a paper from Caroline Rogge in 2020, and she distinguishes between sort of three core elements of transformative innovation policy. And she says the three sort of core elements are related to the directionality and participation. It requires an instrument mix for niche support and against harmful regimes. And it's also about creating favorable institutional and governance arrangements. So for these 3 points, I'll look more specifically into some elements that we can use from existing indicator frameworks. So for the first one, directionality and participation, I think we can draw some inspiration from existing R&I indicators that relate to the SDGs, being the directional sort of reference point. And in the existing SDG indicators, we can see some indicators that specifically relate R&I activities to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I've listed here some of them mostly related to SDG 9, but also one to SDG 2. We can also draw on RRI indicators, though, to perhaps cover this participation element. And here we can look at the R&I democratization index, and there's other indicators related to, for example, national infrastructure for the involvement of citizens, citizens' preferences for active participation in decision-making, and others, more of them in the paper. Coming to the second element now of ROGE, which is the instrument mix for niche support and against harmful regimes. I want to draw your attention here to the transformative outcomes concept developed by Schott and Vipashi Ghosh. And there is a range of transformative outcomes. I think it's 12 in total. I've only picked up 2 here to illustrate this, but the possible indicators are in the paper. 2 transformative outcomes which will relate to the niche support, but at the later stage, is upscaling and circulating. And again, we drew on different papers and different references from the literature to think about what could be used here. So evidence of, for upscaling, it could be evidence of a number of stakeholders that engage with the new practice, evidence that the practices, or that the number of the practices adopted in a specific area or sector, the speed of adoption, but also the cost for an additional application of a practice as being sort of a precondition for upscaling in the first place. For circulation, similar approach. We looked at the literature here, and you could, for example, use evidence of collection of experiences and knowledge, synthesis of experiences and knowledge, the availability and access to learning materials, the sharing of learning materials, and the exchange of resources, more generally speaking. And lastly, for this third element of ROGE, the institutional and governance adjustments, again, RRI indicators could be used. There's also indicators that we can perhaps get inspiration from that are actually coming from different sectors where governance arrangements, positive governance arrangements for transformative change in a certain sector have already been established. These ones are drawn from the sustainable urban water management sector. And here existing frameworks already list elements that point us to conducive governance arrangements for transformation. And lastly, we want to mention that indicators for the transformative outcomes also need to think about the creation of new institutional and governance arrangements rather than just the destabilization of the old. And this is something that we currently want to continue to develop, as we don't see it as reflected as it should be in the transformative outcomes framework at its current stage. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much, Christoph. So now we have the comments from Paulo Patiño. So please, Paulo, the floor is yours to comment the papers and try to be brief. And so we can have conversation, and Christoph, Amy, and Caroline, they can provide some answers. Thank you very much, Paulo.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Carolina, Amy, and Christoph. And I am learning a lot about these topics because, as I said before, I am not expert in this area. I'm very enthusiastic about the new paradigm, the transformative innovation policy. But now I am involved in your ideas, in your proposals. So I have more questions than comments. So. For Carolina, yeah, I have I understood the position about this two kind of analysis. One is using the traditional or the typical analysis of the innovation systems. So, but I want to be clear about that. Is you are proposing that these typical indicators can be modified to apply to these new areas, to these new developments of the policy in science and technology? is my first question. And the other question is how to achieve purposive and directional innovation. As you discussed something in the paper, but I want to know a little bit more about that. Or there is what are the most important limitations to perform formative assessment of the transformative innovation policy? That's another question that is results for me in this in the lecture reading your paper. Other is which alternatives do you have to go beyond beyond the output like measures and develop new metrics to better capture transformative outcomes? So I understood that it's not necessarily the most important thing is outcomes than output. So how to achieve these transformative outcomes is I think is the question. Finally, how to use additionally as a way to construct the counterfactual based on a generative view of causality. That is one of the things you discuss in your paper is the causality of the metrics or the analysis of the metrics and indicators. So I want to know a little bit more about that. Is okay for you, Carolina?
Thank you, Pablo, for your comments. Should I answer now, Oscar?
I'd prefer if you can make all the question, Paulo, and then Christoph and Amy they have like, time to think, so it makes things faster. If
okay, no problem. Okay, for Amy, I enjoy a lot this paper because it's very new for me, the green capital concept, but I agree with most of the things that you discuss in this paper. However, I have I think a very important question is how to implement these initiatives, metrics and indicators in the new conditions post-pandemic, because I understood that is a long way to develop these metrics and indicators. But now the conditions, the situation of the war in general is very different. So how this pandemic changed the conditions is the first one. And the second question is, in countries with less cultural and economic development, how to implement this kind of initiatives? Because I am thinking about my country, about Colombia. It's not easy in this moment to think about that. What do you think could be necessary to develop in this way to implement some concept like a green capital? I think this is the most important question for me in that for your paper, Amy. And for Christoph, I enjoyed also this paper because I learned about different the different evolution of the concept of science and technology, innovation systems, and now the transformative innovation policy. However, it's not easy to catch the final part in the proposal for this analysis of the transformative innovation policy is because there are different aspects that you work in the paper. For example, directionality and participation. For me, it's clear, but in the last part, in the different processes, process 1, building and nurturing niches, process 2, expanding and mastering niches, and process 3, opening and unlocking regimes, I want to go deep in this new forms of evaluation, or these institutional arrangements and governance structures that are oriented towards the achievement of societal goals. So I want to know how to implement this kind of indicators and metrics for to understand how in our country, for example, and the regions of municipalities to implement this kind of analysis. So it's for me a little bit more complicated to understand in our context. But I want to know your perception also about this possibility in countries like mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo. So if we can go in the same order, I think that it could be easy. So just Carolina, please.
Sure. Pablo, thank you very much for these questions. I think some of them we are still reflecting on them. I will try to do my best here. Just to comment first on the typical indicators and how we want to modify them to apply to these new areas. Actually, what we wanted in this paper was to go back to the literature and see what typical indicators were pointed out in order to analyze the functions more specifically. So we went back to Bergek and Huckert's original paper, and we checked what kind of metrics they pointed out. But we also saw that they are mainly measures and can be also related to quantitative evaluations mainly. And we wanted to bring this idea of qualitative evaluation also, which can also be addressed by the functions in terms of assessing the outcomes of the system performance. So we believe that with the functions, we can go more in depth in the analysis of how the system is performing in terms of these different functions that we pointed out. So the knowledge that is being developed and by which actor and what resources are being mobilized and so on. In terms of how to achieve purposive and directional innovation. I think that's actually an open question to everyone. And in my view, I think this also needs to be addressed since the beginning when policymakers are developing the program theory and thinking about the impact logic of the program. About formative assessment, I think some of the limitations would be related to the time constraints and also the budget involved to develop the framework, the evaluation, and also the need of, we are also talking a lot about the use of mixed methods. And I think that also require us to have different skills. And I think that's also a limitation that you need different skills in order to address and develop a full formative evaluation. And which alternative do you have to go beyond the output and develop new metrics to better capture transformative outcomes? I think this workshop has been very helpful to address that, and I think some people have very nice ideas. What we brought here was basically our first gather of different indicators that we found in the literature, and in terms of the functions, we wanted to see how the different questions that the literature says that we should address to address directionality could be applied to analyze the system's functioning in terms of and think about these different indicators in terms of directionality. And also how to use additionality in order to construct the counterfactual based on the generative view of causality. This we don't know yet, because I think that's a more optionalization question. But I know that some people in Australia have been developing that for innovation programs, and their idea is to discuss as much as possible with stakeholders, and it's not a successive idea of causality as we have in randomized control trials, but it's more like discussing with and agreeing with different stakeholders. So it's like more this realistic approach to evaluation, but we are not sure if we follow this idea. Maybe that will be part of our evaluation in the future, but only part. We might need to discuss other aspects of evaluation also, especially if we want to include quantitative methods.
Thank you, Carolina. I don't know if
Thank
Paulo
you.
has any reaction for that. Or
No, it's
Amy.
It's fine.
Okay, Amy, please. Your microphone is mute.
I just want to apologise about the mess behind me because it's on the table of things I need to do. So compared to Christoph's very nice systems mind map, it's quite a difference. So sorry, I'll just move this way. Yeah, thank you very much, Pablo. They are very good points. So the two questions around how I'll start. Yeah, okay. How has the pandemic affected the ideas that I presented? Well, I think it's probably I think it could have a positive effect because obviously it's generated a lot of appetite out of necessity, but also it's accelerated, you know, this transition towards doing stuff online and homeworking, and you know, there will be new practices coming out of that, and I don't think it's going to stop people thinking, you know, as a society, it's not going to stop people having the capacity to act in a green way or not to act in a green way. It's not going to kind of things like citizens assemblies or forums, or you know, like you have town council meetings and planning meetings that can be online, and I know that these are not easy in contexts where internet is an issue, where, you know, if you've got a country like I used to work in Africa, and there are places where, you know, they don't even necessarily speak the language, you know, the formal language of the country. They may speak a kind of a native language, which means that they can't, you know, so these are obviously challenges because you have multiple layers of translations, and people are you know, especially people who have issues, haven't had a, you know, quality education, the concepts that they can you know, embrace and work with, let alone kind of like understanding complicated metrics around outcomes is, you know, it's very different to kind of, you know, somebody who's done years of studying at university. So obviously there are these discrepancies, but I think if you can start off with things that people can understand, you know, framing it in a way, for instance, like, okay, has this had a negative impact on the river, or has it had you know, a positive effect on how happy you may feel, and things like that. So you can still frame things in a different, more simpler way so that people on the ground can understand them at the community level, and in a kind of local government context. I mean, obviously things are very different levels in terms of you know, like how much resources people have got to implement things, and sometimes, you know, in some developing countries you just have somebody with a desk and no computer and you know, pieces of paper, and it's completely different to how, you know, this online world that we're talking about now. So but I think, again, like if you can frame things in a simple way where you have a kind of, the metrics won't necessarily they could still be more complicated, but if they were entered into the system in such a way that, you know, there were these kind of generic metrics that somebody who was kind of taking ownership of this kind of overarching system could monitor, but there was a kind of local application that was easier to follow. I think that is definitely possible. And obviously, like, you've got things like apps, you know, Africa, for instance, which is what I know more than yeah, so Latin America, but you know, like you've got apps that can also help to generate knowledge and connections and things like that. So, you know, when we talk about social network analysis, just people's engagement with kind of registering, okay, well, I've done an action here, and that's kind of generated some kind of positive effect on the environment. I'm going to kind of register it on my app. You know, like there are ways that you can still kind of reach ordinary people, if you like, and these kind of mechanisms kind of take place. So I think that it's definitely still possible to do, if not accelerated. And I think that yes, there are going to be differences, but that's this idea around this platform that if you can get people in different contexts, whether it's developed or developing, to support each other in locally appropriate initiatives with locally appropriate resources in the right language, then I think that it can work.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you,
I don't know,
Amy.
Paulo, did you have any reaction? No, not yet. I have one, but I'm gonna wait for the main discussion. So first, Christoph, if you can answer the Paulo questions, please.
Yeah, thanks for your questions, Pablo. Regarding your first question, for the different processes that are described, the process for niche building, the process for niche growth, let's say, or mainstreaming, and the third process for regime destabilization. These are actually, we use this in this paper as a given framework, so we don't really explain the background of all of these processes and the specific elements related to that because of the project we're working in. So we just take this framework as a given and look at the indicators for them. So it's, I understand it falls short in the working paper. But if you want to know more about these specific processes and the elements of these processes, then I may refer you to the transformative outcomes paper specifically by Schott and Gosch, who really explain what they mean and what their elements are and why they are important. This is definitely not in our working paper, and it comes from the project structure that we work in and that this framework is used as a given. But perhaps briefly on them, to go into a little bit more detail there. There's essentially three processes. One is about the building up of niches, one is about the growth and the mainstreaming, and the third one is about the regime destabilization. And from the existing research and the long history of research in, for example, strategic niche management, we found there's much more material you can work with the first two processes around niche building, development, and mainstreaming. You can look at supportive regulation, you could look at supportive network structure, you could look at processes of learning and those sort of things. What's much less developed and becomes more and more important now and is recognized as more and more important is this element of regime destabilization. And I think a lot more work needs to go into looking specifically at that because less is out there and much more work needs to be done on defining what that actually means and looking for evidence of when that happens. Possible pointers are though, and I think Carolina, you already touched on some of them, but other possible pointers are, for example, in the literature on discourses, a counter narrative, a counter discourse that grows in population, becomes part of the mainstream media is a fantastic indicator perhaps for a destabilizing regime. Social movements literature also has something to offer there, I think. Regarding your second question, Pablo, in terms of implementing these indicators, we don't fully know yet. I have a gut feeling though, and I can tell you about my gut feeling. We use them in a co-creation way. So what does that mean? We work with project participants specifically and co-create these indicators with them. Why? Because they become part of a formative evaluation approach, where the indicator becomes a tool for learning and for reflecting. And I think this is the power of those indicators then specifically, because they provide a reference point to reflect on what is happening in a project. We work with a sustainable land use management project to think about what is happening and what can be improved. So in terms of implementing them, I think it needs to be a co-creation process. Also because they need to be made context specific. I wonder if you can come up with a set of indicators that can be applied to all systems and all development stages and so on. So again, this co-creation process is important to make them context specific. And at the end of the day, I think you also then make indicators that are truly valuable for the people that they should actually be provided for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. I don't know if you have like any reaction, Paulo, or if we can go
I prefer that you
okay, thank you.
Complement this.
I I prefer that the other participants, I encourage you like to make some questions. So please go ahead. I think there is many things to be discussed. So please. We have 10 minutes more for a discussion. So I think that is a good moment to try. So Matthias, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'll get in there quickly since we've only got 10 minutes. It's mainly a question for Christoph, actually, because, but any of you actually, because it's got to do with evaluation and how you evaluate a transformation in particular, because transformation is something which is supposed to be very context sensitive, place-based and so on. Otherwise, but at the same time, it does look for systems change. And to do that, you have to bring together, you have to scale. It's inevitable. You have to scale things at some point, institutions, structures, and so on. So one of the issues that I'm having a bit of a problem with is the concept of transitions, you see, has an intellectual baggage around it. And when you try to implement it in different places, the realities of the people involved are very, very different. Call them imaginaries, call them whatever you want. And so there's got to be some adaptation. So you adapt everything. What do you adapt? What changes? What do you keep? And you know, we're doing this in practice. You know, I'm one of the co-authors on that paper you were talking about, and it's not an easy problem to resolve, I have to say. Probably some actor network theory may help. But have you thought about that in terms of what bit you keep? Let's say you keep the 12 outcomes, you know, they're rigid, you don't move them, and then you adapt it to the situation. That tension is something I'm having a bit of trouble with. I don't know if you understood my question, but
was your question in terms of like if you evaluate, let's say, a transition experiment, was your question around what, when you do so, what elements of that transition experiment you want to keep or disregard or continue to strengthen in relation to these transformative outcomes?
Yes, I mean, you have when you came up with the, not you, but anybody comes up with transformative outcomes, there's an intellectual baggage associated to them where you think about the way in which that transition should happen. But when you actually do it in practice, the imaginaries of people are very different and they can take you in a different direction. So that creates a tension between the system change you're trying to create and the realities of people, sort of place-based. Sorry, if I'll shut up. If it's too complicated, then I won't.
No, yes, it comes with a baggage, and it comes with preconceived ideas of how change should happen. We see this in this project that we're currently working on. This is very much entrepreneurship heavy, sort of classic innovation type of thinking. And then if you introduce concepts like creating visions for navigating expectations, or perhaps even the unlearning of actors, then I think can get a lot of puzzled faces. I think the transformative outcomes, though, provide, at this stage of how I experience them, at least the language and a new type of thinking that goes beyond these more traditional innovation approaches, which tend to focus on entrepreneurs, markets, bottom-up, niche stuff, let's put it this way, and says, okay, this is not enough. There's other elements that we need to focus on. Have we started to consider them yet? And if so, how? And if not, how are we going to do this? So it perhaps expands their horizon. Yeah, I don't know if they would then let go of their old beliefs. I'm not sure. We are not that far with the projects we're working on at this stage. But we can see some positive reflections in terms of what else they need to be doing or what else they could be doing, which they haven't considered yet. And in that sense, they are perhaps valuable.
Can I just add something? I mean, because if you're talking about evaluation, then like an evaluation will kind of look in depth around what worked well and appraise a project and kind of take that long-term approach. But one other thing that you could potentially do is, like, as I said, like if there was somebody kind of monitoring a wider system in a way, you could have like a rationalization of some of these indicators, and it like almost do like a thematic analysis on them and kind of like cluster them, and like how you could do a social network analysis on the indicators that are being generated, and like to what extent could you kind of, you know, some in one context they might have come up with some, and actually these are quite similar, so you can kind of like do a matching, and then if they're very, very different, then you can kind of link that to a kind of appraisal of, well, how much is culture affecting what indicators are being come up with, and their replicability.
Yes, I think that is a very interesting contribution from out of the table done by Siddhartha. So what he's talking about it is how we can have adaptive metrics, precisely to think about this different notion of space, time, and how we understand transformation. So he speaks like about the politic roles of metrics, but as well how the validation of these metrics depends on certain actors. It could be academics, it could be policymakers. So in the process of evaluation, also to take into account like this consideration is important as well. But what I find very useful with the idea of adaptive metrics is that the theory is more open. So with the transformative outcomes, we are close to the MLP basically. So with this other type of metrics, we have also the opportunity to build up new theory. And I think that is also, I mean, it's another direction to go. Just as a comment, and although we have like 3 or 4 minutes left, I don't know, sorry, if someone else wants to make a question or underline something. Caroline, maybe if you want to refer to the discussion as well.
Yes, I can refer to what Matthias said. I, of course, don't have like a full answer for the question. I think that's a very complex aspect. But also connected to what Oscar said, I think like much of the evaluation needs to be adapted and customized to the program and to the intervention. So of course you can always refer to theory and the literature, and but I think we also need to complement with what was the initial idea from different policymakers and practitioners when they developed the program. And of course they have like the local mentality and the local aspect in the local context. And we are talking about different mental models. And I see like each actor have a different mental model when they talk about a program. And I think like this will definitely impact the way the program is developed from the beginning, and also like how is it conducted and implemented. So like, of course we can have some general frameworks, but I think it will always need to be adapted according to the program specifications and the intervention which they are referring to, like talking about another aspect of the discussion.
Thank you, Caroline. So we are near to end the time. So I don't know if someone else have a comment or a question. I think that people is coming back, apparently. I don't know. Luis is here. So we can wait or we can chat. You can catch up if you want. Or it's going live. I just people are coming back I think now, so no, it's not time for catch up.
Oscar.
Paulo.
Yeah. I have a question for Carolina. It's about the SDGs. How to involve the SDGs in your proposal, because it's not clear in your paper the evaluation of the SDGs. How to involve these SDGs in your analysis?
Interesting question, Pablo. Actually, we didn't incorporate the SDGs directly in the framework, but we will touch about them in the program, in relation to the program. I didn't talk about it in the presentation or in the short paper, but we are working together with the Swedish Innovation Agency, and they have some strategic innovation programs which are conceptualized as transformative. And each project, each strategic innovation program, they focus on different SDGs. So that's where we would go for different SDGs in relation to the specific program. So for example, there is this program which we will probably start with, is the bioinnovation, which aims at the idea is to transform Sweden, the economy in Sweden in a bioeconomy until 2050. And I know that they build up in I think 6 different SDGs. So we would look for these 6 different SDGs, for example, related to circular economy and bioeconomy in general when developing the program theory, probably.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. I think that now people are coming back, so I think that Gabriel is not here yet, so we can wait for him. Again, it's time to catch up. If you want to chat each other. She's coming back.
Ya todos están acá.
I cannot see Gabriel. I think that Gabriel's table.
No.
Well, hi, Gabriel. Sorry, I didn't see you. So,
at your side.
Yeah, sorry. But it's, yeah, I think that is different visualization in every computer. So you were like very far away, so I couldn't see you.
Okay. Well, I just want to say goodbye to the other session because this was very difficult. Well, I think that we are at the last moments of this workshop. I hope that you had enjoyed the last sessions. And in these sessions, we are going to present some results of these sessions. The commentators are going to present his vision, other visions about the sessions. And well, I think that it's important to begin because we are short of time. Well, begin with Jose Luis. You have to do it first.
My time again.
Yes, it's your time.
Okay.
Your time again.
Okay, so thank you again for this nice discussion, because it's really interesting to understand what is the logic of this transformative idea of looking forward to new scenarios, sustainable new scenarios, right? What are the processes that help to get those goals? So the first thing in our discussion we said clearly is that we need really this research in order to establish the role of scientific research in sustainability goals. So we have to have this overall picture. Within this, we have the discussion that it's important the role of international collaboration in this kind of production, because it's a way to overcome this national methodological nationalism of the metrics, and a way to see in a realistic way what is the nature of the relationship between established centers in the center and the periphery, if you allow me to use those words. Second issue that we discussed in this session, and probably a transformative outcome of this workshop, is the need to combine participatory network research and other methodologies well developed, like this methodology about transformative outcomes. I really think that if we combine those methodologies, we can get new insights. For instance, I put the example of research on national protected areas or fisheries or other common natural parks. And this research shows that not all the structures, governance structures, are good for sustainability issues. So some of them are better than others. So probably in this new regimes that you are looking for, this new regime aligned with the sustainability goals, probably they have a common structures, common governance structures that we still don't know what they look like. And I think it's a good thing. Try to understand what are, you know, the best governance structure for those new transformative scenarios you are looking for. And well, some things we were also a bit critic with participatory research, because it's not the panacea, it's not the global solution, because in some cases we have a lot of endogamous, you know, validation, because people are homogeneous despite the quest for heterogeneity, but this is something we already know. So finally, I think Gabriel have to add something about the fourth paper.
Jose Luis, no, I think that you take all the issues or the majority of the issues.
Okay, well, what I understood, because I could not read, you know, the paper. Okay,
yeah.
Right. Is that the need to combine different, how do you say, metrics, not metrics. This is epistemology, epistemological metrics. So it's a very, you know, interesting proposal, but of course, yeah, in order to avoid what we mentioned before, this national methodological nationalism, metrics nationalism, or others, because power is embedded in the metrics in the natural way, So I think yes. So the global discussion was this. Yes, finally, I will say that we should keep working in this direction. And yes, looking for sustainability goals, trying to have the global picture, try to combine and to get synergies from different contributions in order to come out with new methodologies and new insights, and try to overcome the difficulties, and try to be realistic and not just politically correct. You know, try to be critical, realistic with metrics, with our own research. As a scientist, I will have to be realistic, critical, and try, and this is my, you know, contribution, and try to look the underlying structures behind everything, even transformative new scenarios.
Jose Luis, maybe I just add that the CDAR presentation was very interesting, because he's not looking the measurement and the metrics itself of their selves.
Yes,
he's trying to, yes, it's about the legitimation of the use of metrics and how the metrics improve some programs that could be better for the transition or transformation, depending on the use of these metrics. And this is a way that I think that we have to dig in very, very much and more.
But this
and
is
more
the point.
Time.
The point is what we have to be really sensitive to counter extreme critics in order to be more realistic and try to understand what is really going on, not just you know, to be, as I say, politically correct or feel comfortable with our research.
Right, I agree. Okay, well, the second, that's the seventh session was addressed by Eliana. Eliana, are you there? Oh, Eliana is not here, but Marta Liliana, do you have any comment, maybe?
Your microphone, Marta.
Yes, it was very interesting on the conversation. The 3 projects from Brazil will explain and show how social technical networks are increasing and are being supported in Brazil, and all the experimentation process. So it was very interesting to see how what is happening in Brazil, like taking all the theory and putting into practice. But also we discussed how to make it in the other way around, maybe focus on what is going on in the context and try to create and build new theories from the context and create transformation from that. So in that sense, also we have the case from Ireland and Shred It, which is a really interesting and innovative tool for food sharing, and is building a very, very huge system. So, and it has technological implications, and also networks working around that, stakeholders, a bunch of stakeholders. So yeah, to build all that, is important to take into account all the methodology and also all the co-creation process. And that was our discussion about it. And also at the end, Eliana just closed the session talking about the constraints and barriers that we have, not only in South America, for instance, in Brazil, financial barriers to get more support to create all these social technical niches, but also in all over the world, and also because of the COVID-19 change all the situation. So we are all vulnerable at the moment. So there are some big barriers and constraints that are maybe perhaps making transformation a little bit more difficult at the moment. So yeah, that was the conversation, and yeah, it's important to have all these barriers in mind, and maybe think how we can just break it with the transformation thinking. So yeah, that was our session.
Thank you very much, Liliana. Well, we have the session that leads Pablo.
Yep.
Okay, go on, Pablo.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 papers. The first one was a functions approach for evaluating transformative innovation policy, indicators and metrics. It's very interesting, the evolution of the work of this, of the Carolina and her group. I think the most important thing is that these indicators and metrics is the development of indicators and metrics to assess the different aspects of the transition, the innovation, TIP, and the more important thing for me was there is evolution from outputs to outcomes. That is very important. Not just show evaluation of indicators for outputs. So it's necessary to go to outcomes and also to impact of this the innovation policy and the changes that are producing in the different systems. That in that way, these indicators are the better way to capture the transformative outcomes. Is the idea of these papers. Also, they Carolina explained some limitations at this moment. For example, is necessary to complement these indicators and metrics with more thorough system analysis. There is need to include some new aspects to capture these transformative outcomes. So I think it's a paper that shows the evolution of the work in that area. In the second one is operationalizing the measurements and incentives towards recreating green capital in the production of the next sustainability outputs. And me show us the concept, develop the concept of the green capital. I think it's not a very new, but is in this paper is possible to understand in more complex way that is the concept, the theory behind the green capital. This green capital is a is shown by AMI as a possible transformative metric, and so it's possible to evaluate different aspects using green capital. For example, the analysis of the alignments and misalignments between the social needs and demands of the socio-technical systems. Also, it's possible to analyze the connections between resources and different contexts in the that they are using this concept of green capital, mainly local level. For example, small cities, municipalities, and communities. It's possible to apply some of these metrics and indicators to analyze green capital. Also, it's possible to identify the forms of capital and financial flows that are using these communities or these local governments to implement some policies to respond to this concept of green capital. So I think it will be an important work for the future. However, it's necessary to consider the consequences of the pandemic about this green capital as a metric for transformative policies. And finally, the final paper, the evolution of R&I paradigms and associated evaluation and indicators frameworks by Christoph, is very interesting because it's possible to understand the chronology of the evolution of the different perspectives of science, technology, and innovation policy, and the way that the metrics and the indicators are also evolve and have had evolution to be more appropriated to evaluate this concept, mainly the transformative innovation policy. So it's at this moment they are working in the rationality, in the participation, but also in very interesting concepts. There is the niche support and against harmful regimes. I understood three different processes: building and nurturing niches, expanding and mastering niches, and opening and locking regimes. That will be an important proposition. This process will be an important proposition to implement the evaluation and transformative or the transformative innovation policy. So I think in the future we will be here more about this work of Christoph. Finally, for Christoph, it's very important the co-creation process to improve these indicators and metrics, because some of these are very new or no well developed. So it's necessary to work with different communities, different groups to develop in the best way these indicators and metrics. So the co-creation for for this area could be a very important application. So I think I learned a lot about that, and I want to thank you to these three groups for the papers. Thank you, Gabriel.
Pablo, thank you. Well, the last wagon, did you have fun there?
Yeah, it's a happy wagon. Yeah.
Okay, please tell us.
Well, it was a very interesting conversation because then it links the project level to all of this big picture. In the end, comes to very small pieces that can be then put together. So what we saw is that then at the project level, there's a lot of knowledge that could actually circulate, because there are at least, we saw 3 papers and then 3 different streams discussing transformative learning, organizational change, formative evaluation, responsible metrics, and then there are others that can inform activities at the project level. There's these different questions that take place at the project level. For example, what are the project's others? Who relates to the project? How to relate to those others? How deeper can be the engagement with others? How is it that then relating to others creates identities? This is very interesting, because then it brings the transformative to also then social relations taking place in different sorts of institutional arrangements, different sorts of, also of project development arrangements that might have some scope or limits that one should take into account when it comes to the transformative. And then there's these actually arises a lot of different questions. One, for example, is what's the relation to the project reach to actually transformative change? Is project evaluation as some sort of metric for transformative change? If it is so, to what extent or how? So one should see in evaluation practice and literature to what extent these kind of metrics that one uses in evaluation then relates to the possibilities of transformative change, also to the possibilities of niche creation, and then maybe the possibilities of regime transformation. This is something to have into account. Also, because at the project level, usually you are not thinking especially of the socio-technical change. You are maybe thinking of the possibilities of autonomy in a community. You are maybe thinking on policy work or policy workers. Maybe you are thinking on special populations, such as women. And then how empowering, bringing about, visibilizing these actors actually are the steps to create transformative change. There's some interlinks that one should have into account to that extent. Maybe, and then just to a final remark about boundary objects, which is a concept that a lot of you might know in this community, that the projects use a lot of these boundary objects to engage, to relate to others. So we have community plans, we have theories of change, we have indicators then as boundary objects. And to what extent, what's the transformative reach of such boundary objects might be an interesting question to tackle on further reflections about how is it that projects and transformative change relate to one another. That would be my word.
Your microphone, Gabriel, sorry.
So sorry, me. I think we are finishing this. This is reaching the final. Thank you very much for all the comments of the commentators, the presentations of all of you. I think that we have only just two last things. The first one is the final comments from Oscar, trying to remember all the issues that we have to do next after this workshop, especially the agenda and the emails that we have to write you. And finally, we have the words of Pablo Patiño. Pablo Patiño, he is going to represent our university and all the Misión de Sabios and trying to collect all the things that we, well this is a very hard task, but at least some final words. Oscar, please remember the methodology that we are going to follow in the next weeks.
Okay, good. I don't know if before someone else want to underline something else. If no, I can go for that. So it is the moment because we don't have a lot of time. Okay, so then the question is like, what is the follow-up of this workshop? So as I said in the beginning, we have next year two important activities. First is the Latin American Metrics Congress. I don't know, Gabriel, if you have a link at the moment, or maybe you can share in the chat and people can look at that. So what we are thinking to do is to have a specific section about transformative innovation, sustainability transitions, and metrics. And then we need to see, we need to chat with people from TIPSI, if maybe we can have in the international conference next year, as well as space to talk about metrics. So we are gonna keep all of you informed about this and the possible ways to participate. So specifically about the workshop, I think that we first have like to kind of summarize like the discussions and have like a kind of report. I think that I'm thinking to send maybe a poll or something like that to get feedback from you, and you can as well like write to us if you have like any comment, recommendation, or to underline something about the workshop. I think that that's important. And then the second thing is like to have a, let me say, like more solid document. So I was reading here the chat. I think that I have a very aligned idea with Lena. That we can do is to organize this by groups. So what we can try to do in the beginning with Gabriel is to push off like the, like to try to lead this activity and try to have like some key actors. It could be commentators, maybe no commentators, they are able to do it, but as well we have like many presenters, so that also can help us like to make this table all together. So we can first like give to you a kind of summary from the discussion, and then you can elaborate a little bit more. And then we can have a common document like describing who was in every section, what was the discussion, what was the contribution of every one of you. And we can try to figure out how from that we can have an agenda, common agenda, or a pathway, let me say, or possible pathways. Maybe it's not just one, maybe there are many of them there. So if you want to write to us and maybe to have another recommendation about what to do, we are very open about that. And I think that that's it, Gabriel, from me. Your microphone again, Gabriel.
Sorry, Oscar. Okay. Well,
may I say something, Gabriel?
Please, Eliana.
No, just to say to the persons that are here with us that this was possible because them. So thank you for let us learning with them. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Eliana. And well, we have the last words from Pablo Patiño. I have presented to you. He's one of the most important actors at the Misión de Sabios here in Colombia. Misión de Sabios was a mission or a commission to try to develop some new policies on science, technology, and innovation. And the transformative innovation was a relevant issue there. Well, Pablo, is all yours, the microphone. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Oscar and Eliana, for this invitation. It's a little complicated for me because it's no words about the workshop because, as I said before, I am no expert in this area, but I think that the presentation is a short presentation that I will show you. Maybe a summary of the very important things about these new paradigms in transformative innovation policies. Let me share the okay, here. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is the final reflection was you see in the program of the workshop. But let me start with this sentence. Is Colombia una nación a pesar de sí misma. Is Colombia a nation despite itself. Is a book from academic from the United States. David Bushnell is a expert in the history of Colombia and Latin America, but mainly Colombia. And he describes in his book a lot of things about the history of Colombia in the last centuries. And the conclusion is it's difficult for a country like us to evolve at a very different social or condition. And in the area of science, technology, and innovation, we have a lot of examples of failures. These are the books and very important documents from the government, from the academic, from the different groups that are working in the idea to transform Colombia from knowledge. And I have to remark two of them. One is the Libro Verde, the Green Book 2030, is a policy proposal based in TIP, and also was developed by the last government before the current government, but is a very important book. It's very state of art in the transformative innovation policy, but the current government has not taken in account these recommendations. And the other book is the Colombia hacia una sociedad del conocimiento. Colombia towards a knowledge society is the main book of the Misión de Sabios that is published this year with a lot of proposals, recommendations, and reflections. But it's hard that the current government take in consideration these recommendations. So we are expert in Colombia in doing diagnosis, doing proposals, but it's not necessarily done by the government by the main groups in our country. The mission of the wise, or Misión de Sabios 2019, was a very important group of people, academic people, 46 people, working in 8 thematic areas. These are the 8 areas that we work during the last year, all 2019, and with 3 transversal topics. There is education, financing, and regions. The concept of the region in Colombia is very important because we have a different conditions in different regions of the country. So these 8 groups work in these different areas. I work in the life and health sciences with the 6 people that are with the conforming of the constitution the group of this topic, life and health sciences. This is the book with the reflections and proposals. I think is one of the most important documents that the academic has developed in the last years, with a lot of reflections and proposals about the different necessities that the country needs to build about science, technology, and innovation and education. The 4 aspects that the mission worked. And I think there are 2 different alternatives that are proposed in these books, because there are different books. This one is the first one, but there are other, the second volume, and there are other 8 volumes that will be published this year. Each thematic group will publish a book with the main reflections and proposals of each of these areas of work. But in general, which are the alternatives for this work of the mission? I think the first one is related with the SDGs, because it's very important to transform the policy of science, technology, and innovation policy around this TIP concept, because a country like ours is not a solid tradition in science and technology and innovation. So the alternative is take the new developments in this area of TIP to try to transform the science and technology and innovation. And the SDGs will be one way to achieve this possibility. This was proposed in the Green Book 2-3 years ago. This was worked with Colciencias in that moment, and Johan Scott also, and other people that is working in that book, and all that is I think will be the best way to implement some of the changes of the proposals and recommendations that the mission is proposing currently. And I think that the summary is this presentation from Johan Scott last year in the context of the mission. He proposed these 5 elements, or say 5 aspects. First, the vision is implementing missions by focus. Is very important. I will be I develop this later. The second one is building a national and regional program for experimentation. Is based in the TIP. Third, the universities involved in mission could work in this with the civil society, firms, and regional governments. I think this is the most important possibility. The universities will be the main actor for the transformation of the science and technology policy. Fourth, focus not only in building niches in regions, but also connecting and scaling this be the role for the new STI minister. This minister started this year, at the end of the year, And I think is trying to develop some applications of the this TIP, but I think that they don't have the conditions, they don't have the expertise and the to develop in a good way the TIP concept. And finally, use formative evaluation tools to learn about the transformative process, collaborating with the TIP consortium. I hope that the new ministers has the decision to be involved with the TIP consortium. However, I'm not very hopeful about that, but could be an alternative. The second alternative will be the mission-oriented SIT policy, because in the mission book, and there is a proposal about that. This is the proposal. There's the 45 people working together in develop these three grand challenges for Colombia. The first one is biodiverse Colombia. The second one is productive and sustainable Colombia. And the third one is equitable Colombia. The idea is following the Mariana Mazzucato's theory to develop missions for these three challenges in order to implement a different way to develop the science, technology, and innovation policy in Colombia. I think this is a very easy way to do. However, at this moment, there is no clear decision of the minister and the government to the implementation of the missions to respond to these grand challenges. So, it's possible that there is we will lost another change. How not to miss this another change in Colombia is, I think we need leadership from some people and some institutions in the country, and I believe the Columbia University has the opportunity to propose to the cities, to the regions, to the whole country at the transformation process, based in knowledge and as an alternative to the current confusion and the confrontation of the violent groups. We have returned to this kind of war that is suffering in the last 60 years. So there, at this moment in Colombia, that is doing a very complicated situation, and now with the pandemic is another element that is implication, has a lot of implications, and the government is forgot the recommendation, the reflections, and the proposals of the mission. Is my appreciation at this moment. So the final pessimistic summary of this is in Colombia, everything changes to stay the same. It's a very typical sentence here. We say there is todo cambia para mantenerse igual. So, sorry by my pessimism about Colombia, but I think that this kind of workshops is necessary to involve more people in our academy, in our industry, and our government, to learn there is another possibilities to develop a new policy for science, technology, and innovation, and that the knowledge is the best alternative to change the country. However, it's not easy in the conditions, the cultural and the political and the economical situations at this moment. So, is there the words that this workshop let me share with you, because it's not a good moment for this country, but I think we need your help to change the conditions. So is everything for me right now, and thank you again for this opportunity to share with you these words. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Gabriel?
Well, it's not a good landscape in Colombia, but I think that is realistic, and it's not only in Colombia. This is a trend to all our countries, not only for the emerging economies, but I think that for more developed economies, and we need realism, I think. Well, I think that this is all. Thank you very much. I enjoyed too much this workshop. Very, very, very illustrative, I think. I hope that you feel the same, and surely we are going to communicate with you with all the results and the outcomes of this workshop. Thank you to the commentators.
Can we open the cameras for a picture?
It is possible for
Sorry?
us.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I don't know. So sorry for interrupt your last part.
No, it's okay. Eliana, can you take the picture?
But I need our logistic team just for put on a square, or maybe maybe Oscar. Yeah, why not Oscar? Can you put like different form and maybe take the picture?
I don't know how to do that, Eliana. Sorry for disappointing you. But to be honest, I don't know. I just know how to say form, and that's it. Yeah, maybe Mauricio.
Okay, now I find it. So,
okay, thank you. Sorry.
Wait, no problem. Ay, me tengo que peinar.
I work on technology, but I don't have any idea about technology. That's the contradiction of life.
I already took like 3 or 4.
Okay. Now I take my one. Maybe if another one to take another. So I see Rocio, Eric. Oh, great. Jose Luis. So nice. Carmen. So thank you for stay here, and bye-bye for the next time.
Thank you, Leonel.
Bye.